Like a yellow overlay text. Very non-scuffed. Great job.
Well, no, because I did it originally just for BrittleKnee and Amie, and I thought, hang on, let's not single them out. Let's do it for everyone. I think it looks better this way.
Your favorite font.
Overrode our names.
I think it looks good. I think it looks good. Okay. Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're joined by the lovely BrittleKnee and Gilbertamie instead of Rise and Nuggy because they're busy with an Indiana Jones marathon. So, in their absence, Octavian, what have you been up to?
Oh man, I'm taking point. I had a really rough league start. I've had sort of like a rising crescendo of performance problems with the game over the last few leagues, and it kind of hit a head this league where I was having some problems with Comcast stuttering my connection. I was having some problems with the game crashing. I was having graphical tear issues. I was having big black boxes show up on screen when I tried to use abilities. And I ripped a couple characters to it in my hardcore start, and I just got frustrated enough that I've swapped to softcore until some of the problems are resolved, which actually the most recent patch has solved a good number of those. So I'm hopeful that, halfway through the league or so, when I get a little bit bored of playing in softcore, I'll do a hardcore restart. But yeah, for now, I'm doing a league in softcore, which I haven't done for a little over a year, I think.
Trade or SSF?
Trade softcore at the moment. I decided to go back to my roots. That's what I used to play exclusively. So,
Ziggy, did you have a prepared leveling package for Octavian?
Or like a pair of Wonderlusts and stuff like that.
Nice little gold.
I'm too lazy to do that. I'm too lazy to do that. Even when I reload my character, I was like, ugh, Tabula, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll get some Wonderlusts.
Same.
And then I gave up on buying stuff.
I just throw binding orbs at things. It works out. You can get through leveling. But yeah, I league started. My first league start was the Rage Vortex Zerker, like in hardcore, and I actually really did enjoy that. But I decided to go with, because before league start, when we had that podcast, we were talking about our potential starters. I really wanted to try a Stormcall Orb of Storms build, but it just didn't look hardcore solo self-found viable. So I figured since I was starting in a trade league the second time around, I would go ahead and give it a shot, and it's performed beautifully well. It in the course of 2 or 3 days, or 3 days just about, I got through all the new content up to T16s, Stormcall is slapping things. I did some of the new mini bosses on like a level 19 skill gem and a 5 link. It worked fine.
Very cool. All right, well, we'll circle back round. BrittleKnee, how's your league start been going?
It's been great. I started in Train Softcore, which is what I normally start on, and I started Explosive Trap. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah, the best thing about playing Explosive Trap is that nobody cares about Explosive Trap. So my 5 link was 2C, and it's an Ashran, so it's like a 5.5. And then my 2120 gym on day 1 was 10C. So for less than half of a tabby, I was ready to go, and I just pushed right into reds. I had the new bosses down by Sunday morning, which I was pretty happy with that timeline. And it's my first league start as a dedicated bosser. I'm trying something out with a team for the first time because I really like bossing. So the fact that I get to log in and see like 40 Guardian maps, I'm just really happy.
That's the dream. That's the worst part of bossing is like all the in-between stuff. If you're like, I'm gonna boss, and then you're like,
I
oh
just
god, I
get to
actually have
sit
to
down
run
and chew up bosses for breakfast. It's great.
Running like 28 maps or something when you want to boss.
Yeah, so is your plan to just like play that one character all the way through, or are you gonna make a mapping character later on, or?
I have like ideas of where I want to take the build as far as like making it a little bit more well-rounded. Like I've got some reserve issue stuff I want to do because I want to do the typical like Grace, Determination, Defiance banner, but then Herald of Ash, Skitterbots, and all this other kind of good stuff. So I'm like, once I tweak his gear, I'll probably just leave him as like the bosser and then roll some other stuff.
Yeah.
Really want to try out the KB Fever stuff just because it looks like really fun for mapping, and I haven't really done much wanding.
I'm going to dread asking this. Amie, how did your league start go?
Yeah.
The grumpy faces on.
Oh my goodness.
Talking. Not great.
Yeah, mine didn't go great either. It's weird though, isn't it?
Is this some joke that I'm not privy to? What happened here?
Yeah, I did. I followed Tarke's build.
Oh,
no. And I stuck with it as long as I could. And then Ziggy's like, I'm going to reroll. I'm like, yes! Please. This is so bad. I'm in struggles.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
From my perspective, it didn't look that bad, and I think like if you went like
That's
full
like
trade, and then that's by comparison, and like got like Rasloth the belt and the snipe helmet and everything going, then I reckon it would do alright. But yeah, it was a bit rough as a league starter though.
I almost cried when I did I did like an alpha mission. And I couldn't do anything. I'm like, okay, at least I've got boss damage. I can take down the architect. Nope. What? No, I'm done. I'm out.
Okay, so was the problem point for you everything, or did it have any redeeming quality?
No, yeah, everything. Everything was the problem point. I do
What an
have
endorsement.
I made you a little sandwich, Tarke. It's my feedback sandwich.
Mhm.
Do you want to hear it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can I rant for a little bit?
Hey, just don't make it all bad.
Go for it.
No.
For it.
Yeah, I did
Shit
a sandwich thing. So we start off with something good. I really like Queen of the Forest and how fast you go. That's fun. 5-link Queen of the Forest. Yep. I really don't like how much I have to upgrade my weapons while leveling. If Ziggy hadn't helped me with that, I would have been out within like half an hour.
Okay.
That was shit. I see why I level spellcasters. I like having a Mirage Archer hat. That's fun. And when it ricochets, that's also
Yes.
pretty cute. You
Yep.
can run around and have DPS uptime. What I don't like is enemy DPS uptime, Tarke. They don't care that they're bleeding. Okay? They don't care. And they just keep killing you. And you run into them and they're bleeding. And it takes a really long time for them to die because the build... Okay, so DPS uptime, that's not great. Hemophilia gloves. They go pop. They're great. Oh, I like my hemophilia gloves. Thank you, Ziggy, for making sure I got my gloves on. Pop, 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 around the screen. It's really good.
On the sandwich, on the
This is a very big sandwich. There's a lot of layers to
We're
this.
halfway
big
through. We're
order.
halfway through.
You got a number 7 with fries.
Okay, next
lot of layers to
negative.
this
Yeah,
image.
go next one. Yeah.
What? Hemophilia was a negative? Okay, now we're getting into the end. It's got bad clear speed.
Yes.
It doesn't clear. Even with hemophilia, it's bad. Yep. Okay, positive. The rupture life bar. When you hit a rupture and the life bar just goes shoo-wah, that's spicy. I kind of wish there was a bit more to it than the life bar just going down.
Mm.
Honestly, like a bit more of a thing. But that looks really good. It sucks at bossing, Tarke. This was supposed to be my bossing build, and it sucks.
Okay, so I'm gonna step in here for a little bit. So
All right.
I think Path of Building lied to me on that one. I think no, because hear me out. So I need to explain the build. I need to okay, so the idea was to do bleed, puncture, rupture, deadeye. I'd never played it before. I'd seen a couple of people playing it in 316 and it looked really solid. So I'm like, okay, let's test it out. I put it into Path of Building. The POB numbers looked really, really good. I did some very basic axe leveling. It felt great for me for the leveling. And I spoke to people who played the build in 316 and like, yep, it should just get 40% better with the bow changes. You should be like lit. I leveled it. I found the leveling really smooth, but I'm quite used to like crafting my own bows, so that went fine for me. The main issue I had with it is there's a lot of density at the moment, and it turns out that shooting like 6 arrows with chain doesn't do anything. Because you're like, haha, we hit 18 enemies. There are 3,000 on the screen right now. Woohoo!
Yep, and they're coming for me now.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the main problem I had with it. You can get, like, if you're doing like the snipe helm and stuff, you can get some like absolutely dirty bossing damage. But I do think there's some weird stuff with Path of Building, the way it calculates the numbers on it, because I have done all the content now on a course to carry tricks with only like 300k damage, and that's like actual 300k damage felt like a million times better than the 700k damage that my bleed bow apparently has. So I think there's something wacky with how POB calculates rupture. I don't quite know. But yeah, I apologize, Amie, for that one. I re-rolled off it as well. It did feel rough.
Okay. I accept your apology. I have the final topping to my like feedback
sandwich.
cake Tarke.
Go for it. Go for it.
Shit sandwich.
Yeah.
Because you're attacking things for so long, you get to look at them for a long time, and it's really satisfying when there's a really big boss just standing there wailing on you, and eventually it goes, and it just pops like a little balloon of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really satisfying animation. I think I like bleed pops second to shatters. So thanks for that experience, Tarke.
You're welcome.
But, never again. Never again.
Am
I up then?
Yeah. How did your least start go, Ziggy?
It's good contrast then that Amie was carrying my damage at Leaguestarter. He was carrying me at Leaguestarter. So yes, I went Impale Bow Champion, and it can be done. It can be done well. And I did keep pushing it to the point where I was like, okay, it's starting to get a little bit less not complete shit at this point. But as a League start, oh, so bad. Why did you all convince me to play it? I would have been far better off probably going early. Or if I had stuck with Fizz Impale, probably going Shrapnel Ballista Champion would have been a much better choice. But yeah, I leveled Rain of Arrows, and Rain of Arrows is okay. It was it's interesting, like the early game bow leveling is really good now. The first like 6 acts or so go really smoothly with some I think maybe the bow changes or something like that helped or something like that, but it was very clean. And then after that point it starts to taper off, and then like man, I was struggling to get into yellow maps, even with really good investment for that day 2 period. Like, you know, I had a really good day 2 bow. Like I can't remember what was good DPS at that point. Don't remember. I've completely moved on to a new build at this point. But had like really good bow, and then I changed to the new bow with the multi-projectile stuff. And I have to say, there's some stuff that I liked there. The new bow was sick, great fun. That thing is really easy to work into a build. The frenzy charge stuff. So I was playing a champion. I didn't change to like anything else. Like probably be better on other classes, but you can do the frenzy charge thing with just a few frenzy charges, and you just spam projectiles around like crazy. So it works really well. But yeah, I didn't have the damage really ultimately to carry it. But I want to kind of go back to messing with that new bow. I also used the quiver, the Impale quiver, and discovered that steel's pretty cool. That kind of carried. And the extra arrows from that's fun. So I was running around with Tornado Shot with like shooting like 10 arrows each time or plus, and that was pretty satisfying.
I think if you actually want to revisit that, there's some potential to like using Frenzy on like with a curse on hit or whatever as yourself, and having Shrapnel Ballistas as your damage. Because the Shrapnel Ballistas will benefit from your extra proj, and every projectile they get can shotgun on a single target. So you would get disgustingly good damage out of that if you have a lot of flat added from like some steel rings and crap like that.
I was kind of using them in that way for a while. Yeah, I was using them for that way in a while, and then I had better performance once I ended up swapping to a barrage setup for single target and Tornado Shot for clear, like leaning into an actual clear setup rather than having just Tornado Shot and then Shrapnel Ballista. But apparently I had a 450 PDPS bow on like end of day 1, which is really good for that point. And I'm like, man, with this investment, like on any other build, I'd be feeling really good right now, right? Like having a good weapon like that and having the rest of the gear be quite good, having some like strong build enabling sort of unique going on. But it was really bad. It was really bad.
Yeah, dude, for all the time, and it was like all our currency. I stopped picking up currency and you just took it all and poured it into your build, and it barely got any better. It was really sad.
It wasn't, don't blame the bow damage chat. It wasn't the bow damage nodes on the so passive. The bow damage passives weren't working. I had only like one of the clusters, and predominantly it was attack speed accuracy stuff anyway, which was working. So no, I can't rightly blame the bugged passives.
Wait, which passives are meant to be bugged?
At League start, apparently some bow passives weren't applying their damage correctly. But it was fixed, and playing after it fixed didn't make any difference ultimately.
I know that Path of Building does calculate some of that stuff incorrectly. So one that baited me briefly is the projectile speed node. That only scales bow hits, but Path of Building calculates that as scaling like bow dot, for example.
Oh,
So it seems like a
yeah.
really powerful node, like, oh, you take this 1 point, gain like 50% increased damage, but it's like, no, the wording is wrong. This won't scale. Stuff like Course Carry won't scale bleed or ignite or any kind of bow ailment or anything.
That's a good node though, that projectile speed
Very
one.
good. Super
For
good if
hit
you're
builds.
doing something like Galvanic and scaling all the AoE and proj, or if you're doing stuff like Quill Rain and then using that to like offset the Quill Rain damage loss.
Yeah, that can easily be like 100% increased damage node, which is extremely good passive efficiency damage wise. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff I want to go back to. I want to go back to mess around with that bow some more, because I think that bow is phenomenal. I think it's awesome, fun bow. I was surprised how cheap it was. It's only like 5C on day 3.
I mean, I've already gotten 2 of them in
MC for a good roll.
SF, so I don't know if it's
Yeah.
very common.
I had a really good one drop actually.
I've got a plan for it. This is how Octavian will appreciate this plan. Slayer. That's the plan.
I appreciate it. Yes,
it has synergy with the frenzy endurance charge
frenzy
node.
charge stacking. Yeah.
So
the frenzy node on Slayer is so underrated. It's so good.
I knew Octavian.
I was thinking about the potential of respecking the champion into a Slayer for that, and to mess around with that. Yeah, and I think the other thing I want to play around with is I do think try Ellie, Bow, Trinity stuff now with more conventional style Ellie stacking rather than say doing Ellie hit or old cold stacking. I think has some potential there too. So maybe something that would be fun to mess around with at some point. But I rerolled as a Fizz Trapper. I wanted to just go extremely meta, something super powerful. Plus, it'd been kind of something I'd been wanting to try for a while. I know technically it got nerfed. I'd never played it before it got nerfed, the Seismic Trap stuff, apart from like when it first came out. But I'll tell you, it doesn't feel like I'm playing a nerfed build. Oh my god, so good. It's night and day. I was at level 65 or something, and I was like, oh, I've already got double the damage of my bow build that has in the 80s, in the late 80s. I was like, yeah, no, this is good. So yeah, smashing some content on that has been really fun, because that's what that's why I rerolled. I was like, oh man, I'm really pushing this build trying to make it work, but like, what do I actually care about? I care about the new Atlas and the new bosses. Why am I like suffering on a build right now when what I care about is the content outside of my character? So it's like, I'll just play something meta AF, and I'm glad I did.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So, what does everyone think of the new Atlas progression system? Let's start off with you, BK.
I think it's really nice just because it kind of brings us back to how the Atlas was, at least when I first got started, which is 3.0. So I came in at, I guess, the Atlas of Worlds expansion. And it had that sort of like nice linear progression of like you start here at tier 1, you end there at tier 16, and you just sort of like move along as you go. And so it was really nice not to have to do like okay, well, this region only has like this range, and you have to go to the corners, and you have to bring it to the inside, and then you do those, and then go back out, and you have to like move your stones around. And so like the fact that there wasn't like all this sort of micromanagey stuff to it, I just really enjoyed. I could just put maps in the map device and then just go, and that was really awesome. And the Atlas passive tree is wonderful, and it was actually a big part of why I decided to start Explosive Trap. As like for the first time, I feel like I wasn't going to get completely hosed picking such a single target skill for a league start, because then I could go through and pick mechanics that are really, really single target focused. So like Metamorph and Harbingers and Essences, and like these things that you can just dump damage on and get them done quickly. Like, sure, I can't clear really fast, but I can still pick up a lot of valuable stuff along the way, whether it's crafting for myself or selling stuff or otherwise. And it's just really, it was really nice to not feel punished, because it's like what most of the anxiety comes from with a league start is like, all right, well, I have to be optimal in like 5 different things or else it's a shitty league start. And like, you don't have to anymore. Like, you completely have the option to do something like I did, which is extremely bossing focused to progress as quickly as possible, and then just camp bosses. Or if you want to like even try out like kind of like the old school low tier, just like run some juice kind of stuff, like Alkin Go. Like you can just pick so many different things that augment like the way the league start feels good to you. And across the board, it's not as punishing as it was. So I think they did a really good job. I was really not sure how they were going to bring like juice out of consumables and put it into the Atlas, but the Atlas passive tree certainly is a way of doing that, and certainly a way I didn't think of. To take all of those systems and then just flatten them down into one is pretty damn awesome.
Yeah, it's worked out really well, hasn't it?
What about you, Octavian?
I mean, I'm in agreement with pretty much every sentiment expressed there. One of the things that I really like about it, which BK sort of touched on at the end, is how little micromanagement there is now. Like, I feel like on a whim, maybe I'll just feel a little spicy and throw a sexton or something at a watchstone if I happen to have one. But other than that, yeah, whatever. Just throwing a stack of 10 fragments, a stack of 10 whatever scarab I've gotten laying around, because scarabs are spat out at me from every league mechanic now in the fucking video game. And just run 10 maps, chisel out and go. Don't have to think about it. Don't have to worry, am I in the right region? Am I following the right mechanic? Am I using the right scarab for this region? It's all one big region. It's wonderful.
I will say, though, sextants feel really out of place now, though. Like, I've even specced into sextants. They're 4 uses. They're slightly less micro. But with how much less micro there is in the Atlas system, it is still annoying having to manage that. Like,
even like scarabs and stuff now, you can just put a full stack of 10 and leave it there.
Yeah,
it's wonderful. The one complaint I have is something that we kind of saw coming in the podcast before the league launched. Kirak missions, after you have all your completion and stuff, feel pretty underwhelming. And I was ready to go to accept the fact that they didn't have the Atlas passives, because they're free and they will have a guaranteed mission in them, which kind of makes up for that if it's a good mission. Something like going and doing an expedition, even without juice, expeditions are pretty good value. But the fact that you also are not getting the free influence packs that you get on literally every single map now with a new influence, it just makes Kirak missions feel like so worthless unless there's a guardian. That's like the only thing that I do anymore from Kirak.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people saying it's good if you're playing in a trade league, because you can like use them to force harvest, which I guess is kind of interesting. But
true, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a little bit underwhelming. I will say, and I was curious to get your guys' feedback on this, I don't know if it's bugged or it's just like bias, but I feel like whenever I spec into a mechanic that isn't guaranteed, that is a guarantee that mechanic will never appear in maps naturally. So I took some of the early map nodes and I spec'd out of them quite early in SSF because I feel like I didn't really need all of them. So I dumped like all my excess. I dumped like 20 excess points into Breach, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do some super excited Breach content. I then did a full day of mapping, and I swear to God, I got no random Breach procs. And I'm like, well, all of these passive points are doing nothing for me. I could just put them in Harby, and they'll be in every map. And I thought, no, let's not be that guy. Let's put them in Harvest, because like I want to craft some stuff. Harvest is a pretty good mechanic. Let's put all these points into Harvest. So then put all my points into Harvest and didn't get any wild Harvest. And I'm just like, I could just put this all into Harvey. So now I'm playing like a really boring cookie-cutter Atlas where I just take all the forced influence pack size stuff. I juice up some essences. I juice up some Harvey. I juice up some strong boxes. It feels good, but it's just like, I had all these really exciting plans, but they feel so weak in comparison to guaranteed mechanics. And yes, if I was playing in a trade league, I could force mechanics like Breach into every map through Scarab usage, and I guess that's kind of where you balance it. But it feels very, very kind of disjointed with just like the discrepancy in power between like a guaranteed Harby with like all the juice you get from that, or like the guaranteed Strongbox stuff. It's like the Abyss node. I've had the Abyss node, the 5/6 property thing, in my Atlas since day 2. Have I seen a single 5 or 6 stat Abyss jewel? Nope.
Are you doing a lot of the farming of the new influence monsters?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's provided me with enough scarabs that usually if I want to focus a mechanic for a few maps, I have like 2 or 3 rusted or polished of basically every kind of scarab at the very least. From just
I have a lot of scarabs and I'm using them, but my point kind of is because I can't guarantee that I'm going to have Breach in every single map. It's one of those things of it's like, why spend 15 points or however many points to juice up this thing that might proc 1 in however many maps compared to just super juicing a thing which is always in the map when I can also then use scarabs to further boost the Harby. It's like I can have ambush and Harby on every single map every single time regardless of scarabs and then make them even better with scarabs, or I can have like tiny uptime on Breach or Legion or
Yeah.
something.
It's a loss of player agency too,
Mm.
because it's no longer a choice between two things that are equal or similar. It's now choose the thing that's always going to be there because that's always going to give you a reward versus maybe it'll show up and then you get the rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the example you give of Breach is a little bit out of whack as well. Like a guaranteed Breach, I think, is equal or less value to a guaranteed Harbinger, and I don't know why you can't get a guaranteed Breach. I feel like
Yeah.
that's just something that needs to be tweaked. Like
Yeah.
that's roughly the same power. A guaranteed like Legion or a guaranteed Ritual, that's going to be a lot more reward than a guaranteed Harbinger or Breach. So I can see why those aren't, get one every single map for free level of value. But I think Breach could pretty reasonably be set to you always get one in each map and not be that
Yeah. I reckon so.
busted
Do you-
comparatively.
Do you think they're worried about the fact that you can like force Chila?
I haven't looked at the Breach nodes too closely, so how consistently can you do that?
Isn't it just like one node? But like because the balance of Harbinger kind of has a top, whereas Breach has, Ash, whatever. It doesn't matter if it's there every map. But if every map or every second map you can get Chila, are they worried that that's going to blow out the rewards? Maybe
It could be that. I would argue that that's not any more busted than operative strongboxes or
True.
like the super harbingers. Like there's some pretty damn powerful stuff on the Atlas. They've pushed the level real far out.
And also like it's one of those things as well as like I've kept all my points into Expedition because Expedition in every map, but when you get an Expedition, the Expedition feels really good. Like I'm fine having some points which I won't always see active, but it feels a bit awkward at least that when you have, for example, the strength of the pack size, like those influence pack size nodes are so strong. So our new Atlas tree takes both the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds ones. It's kind of like when you have these guaranteed strength in every single map, I'm just going to take those and dip into like one mechanic for fun. I think this will be fine as long as like every league they shuffle around the placement a little bit. And that was something I wanted to ask you guys. How long do you think you'll see yourself experimenting with the Atlas skill tree? Like how many times have you respect it, or do you see yourself just being like, oh, this is the best thing and I'm just going to stay locked into this?
I think it depends on what like my primary character is that I'm playing at the time. So like right now it's very focused on like what my character can do, but then when I, my second character, my real character is going to be clear oriented. So that completely changes what I focus on. So I see it having some, just because the regret or whatever they're called is like they are common enough that it's not that big of an investment. So I could really just see it tailoring to whatever I'm probably playing the most. So I could see respecking, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a league.
I reckon for me, most of the time it's going to be like I'm going to have an opening tree, a league starting tree, and that's going to slowly morph into what I want to be doing long term, which is bossing or some longer term mapping strategy. Some sort of like maybe swapping into, say, I'm going to focus on Expedition from now on. So I kind of switch over to that or switch over to bossing more likely, which is kind of like at the moment I'm halfway between the two stages, but I'll start tapering off some of the early stuff. Like I'll start tapering off essences and things and shifting those points over to more bossing stuff. Especially, I don't know, I'm probably jumping around a bit too much, but the like influence every single zone thing kind of blew my mind when I realized that was the way that it works. I was like, oh, wow, I definitely want to go get those passives to boost the pack size and things in those. Yummy.
It's surprising. It's so much more generous than they've ever been in the past. I mean, there have been times in the past when Old Shaper and Elder Influence was a thing where people, remember Shaper strongholds? People could set up their Shaper stronghold in such a way in the Atlas to be able to infinitely generate influence. And those
Elder Rings.
Elder Rings as well. There were a few systems like that, a few system breaks or exploits, whatever you want to call them, that were implemented into the game, and they got fixed like that. Like as soon as they were widespread, they were fixed in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And then this new league comes out, and they're just like, just have it.
You can't have influence every zone. I think that's so good though, like because that fits the whole line of what they seem to be doing here, which is bringing this to the everyman, to every exile, to getting them all interacting with the influence and the new currencies and stuff like that. So having access to the influence so frequently means that those influenced items that you have the chance of dropping, those are spamming around all the time, and you're seeing plenty of the monsters. It's also I also have to say that it's quite good that the given that is the case, that we're seeing influence every single map if we want, that they didn't make too many of the monsters too offensive like we've had in the past with influence monsters being heinous. Imagine if all the influence monsters were heinous like we've had in the past. Run, symbol throwers and whatnot. The only one that seems a little bit iffy is the barrages, the tentacle miscreations from Ida, the blue ones that shoot the blue swirlies. Those are a bit gnarly. But I feel like they might just be a little bit overtuned or something. But it's nothing really like super crazy. So that's great. It's really good.
What do you think, Amie?
I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think the way that Archnemesis interacts with this makes it feel extra spicy. Like you were saying, you weren't getting the 6 property Abyss jewels. You pop an Archnemesis in there that's going to drop Abyss items.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the stacking you can get with this. It's awesome.
It's funny, that's the best way to get 6 property scarabs through Archnemesis than it is through Abyss. Because I've been doing that too.
You mean Abyssal jewels, not scarabs. But the scarab ring as well. And then having the influence that has all the mobs drop scarabs, and then you still stack more scarabs on there. That's
and you get the boss to drop scarabs, and you get an operative strong box.
Yeah. So I get excited when we're able to kind of like leverage our co-op that way, because my tree is pretty boring, like the same as you, Tarke. I don't have mechanics all the time, so it's a little dull. I ran a dunes map or something the other day, and there was just nothing in there, and it was really sad. All little dunes empty as anything. But then when I run a few maps with Ziggy, and we've both got lots of Archnemesis skulls built up, and then we can just like smash out currency and scarabs and Abyss jewels, that's really satisfying.
So Amie and I are doing a co-op tree strategy where I have the right side with Ida and some of the top bosses, and then I have a lot of the like consistent stuff like shrines, lockboxes, essences, and things. And then Amie has like Blight and left side of the tree and the Exarch stuff, so that we can like when we want to chase Exarch, we go in Amie's maps, or a specific mechanic, we go there, and then when we want to do the other stuff or general mapping, we do mine. But yeah, there is a pretty clear delineation when you swap back and forth like that between the effects that are there every map versus the ones that are just a chance, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Since we're on the Atlas tree, just one last thing before we zip forward. Since we were just talking about Exarch versus Eater of Worlds, the top wheels on the trees between them don't feel quite balanced. In software trade,
different.
Yeah, in software trade, the value of Eater of Worlds drops is dramatically lower than Exarch, because tons more people are doing Eater of Worlds because it's just way better to juice your maps with. Because one of the nodes has like 50% increased spawn rate of altars, with no downside, just 50% more altars basically. Whereas Searing Exarch has a bit of a higher chance to spawn an altar when you first find the influence in the map, which is a more valuable altar. You want altars early so the bonus applies the whole map. So I can see the logic there. But for some reason, it then comes with the downside of you take 10% increased damage per altar you have active, which is just ridiculous. 2 of those and you're already at baseline 20% shock. That's insane. And that, that will be additive with shock, or if you're intimidated or something. It's just obscene.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys what you thought about the balancing aspect, and also the fact that Maven feels awful to run now. Like, with how strong this influence stuff is, it's like, oh, better get those Maven passives. Oh god, this feels awful now. But it feels, do you think they should change it at all? Do you think they will nerf it? Because this is very absurd. Like, the amount of... It's like, it's fun, and it's fine. But
I wonder why Maven can't witness boss fights while we're doing Exarch or what's her face? Like, because she can be there. Like, I understand the lore thing of like why the Exarch and the Eaters can't be together at the same time because they create a black hole or whatever. But the Maven can be alongside them. Why can't she just pop in and witness our boss kills while we're doing Eater maps or Exarch maps? And then we wouldn't have to make the decision between like progressing the cool bossy stuff with Maven versus doing the influence progression for the others. Because like you said, like I do think that there's a problem. So I don't know. I feel like we should just be able to do both at once. Why can't we just have that checked and then right or left?
It is. It's just I don't know. I feel like this altar stuff is really cool, and I like it a lot. But it just seems like so insanely like powerful compared to anything we ever had before. With like no, because we're not talking from a point of view of like, oh, I've set up my Elder Ring, I'm sextant blocking. Like we're literally saying we've done the content and we've pressed the blue button. It is absolutely absurd the level of power.
You've assigned your action points as well. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of whenever we have these conversations, there's always people like Tarke's saying they should nerf the fun. No, the fun. But it's just like I this is the thing I never really understand about GGG is they'll be so conservative with some systems, and then they do stuff like this, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, so yeah, it's like they've nerfed other mechanics for seemingly being too powerful or too strong. If this is the new baseline, like, where do you go from here? Like
the really obscure like example of this that I always like to bring up is back in Synthesis League, there was a modifier you could get that would apply to your whole memory map that would make it so that when you killed rare monsters, they would be resurrected and like fight by your side. So it's sort of like a mini headhunter, except they would be resurrected and their AI would not cause them to follow you. They would just stand where they were resurrected, and they would last for about 15 seconds. So for some reason, they had to make that like specific mechanic incredibly weak in case players were broken by it. And then this time around, they're just like, here, have shrines that last almost the entire map, or have the new influence packs which just spit out 20 scarabs in a map. And I'm not really coming down in favor of one side or another. The inconsistency, as you mentioned, is very confusing.
Yeah,
and then turning around and trying to balance it against her pathway, Maven's pathway, which is more like bossing centric. Like you elevating her to something where her rewards are feeling equal to what you're getting out of mapping, which is a sliding scale depending on relative juice and everything else. Like how much are you rolling it? What other stuff are you using? How many other atlas trees are like fundamentally building upon this that you're then getting more out of? Like taking the range of what you can get out of the maps and then trying to equal Maven's little 10-way boss fight drops against that is really hard, because like that's one of the things that they've struggled with for so long is like, how do you make a boss drop feel impactful when you can just turn around and juice and blast maps? And like I don't know what they would do. Like I definitely see a lot of these different nodes and whatnot being brought down relatively. But if they are intent on leaving this 3-way system, she's going to need a lot too. And I don't even know how you would add that to her, aside from being like, okay, we'll expand her drop pool and then add all this random stuff that can come from the different map bosses. Or if there are map boss specific modifiers, and then apply those same modifiers to the 10-way fight, so that if you have chances for scarabs and other things from bosses, then it happens in there too. Like, I don't know what you would do to try and even make it competitive, because right now it's not. It's like, all right, do the different invitations that you need to get, the stuff unlocked, to get splinters, to get to her fight, knock her out of the way, get the feud out of the way, and then it's like, all right, then I'm not going to ever click on the middle button again. There's no reason to.
What would be really neat? They could implement it as an Atlas point maybe, or just have it be the default behavior. But we've got 6 other influence types that aren't really showing up very commonly, and Maven is a collector of things. So when you do Maven, maybe it just randomly chooses an old school influence type and throws it on your map. There's going to be Drox mobs in this one. There's going to be, Elder mobs in the next one. And the next one after that, there'll be Shaper mobs. So if you just want variety, you click the Maven button and you get those variety packs, basically.
Yeah,
that's fun idea.
That'd be fun. I like that a lot. Because we already have the thing, like, there's a base chance whenever you do like a tier 14 plus that you'll get like an influenced map, right? Like an old Conqueror or an Elder or Shaper map. Isn't that like a base chance now?
Like from the map boss?
From the map boss, yeah.
Yeah,
they could maybe.
I haven't inspected any points for it, and I've dropped a few.
Yeah, maybe that could just be tied into a Maven thing. So it's kind of like, oh, you're doing Maven, then yeah, that's how you get that super juiced up, rather than having to like spend the extra 10 points or whatever on the Conqueror nodes or the Elder nodes at the top of the tree. I think that'd be cool. Does anyone have anything else they want to say on that balance side of thing, or should we jump into the bosses? Because I'm very keen to talk about the actual bosses themselves.
Final words on the Atlas stuff is I never felt more motivated to like complete all the maps and progress. So that's like a big win there. Absolutely in love with it. And on the Scarab spam side of things. Like, I don't think Scarab's like the best mechanical thing. Like they're a bit of busy work, but that said, it's far nicer when you don't have to trade for them and they're little keys to fun. So I think it's good that GGG is just giving us heaping handfuls of them
Yay,
to everyone.
fun.
Yeah, here you go. Have keys to fun. So good
I think
stuff.
fundamentally working through this atlas feels better just because of the inherent momentum. So like before we had sort of like that cookie crumb trail of like, all right, get with this watchstone, then that one, then this one, and this one, and then like 30 tombstones later, you're done. This is more like natural momentum rather than being like here dangling these little like chores in front of us like children. It's actually, it builds upon itself to where like it feels better and better and better, and you want to play more and you want to progress more and you want to fill out more of the atlas passive points. So the momentum, instead of being a list of chores, is this actual wave of fun, this desire to play, the wanting to keep playing and not just like, oh fuck, now I have to go do 2 more stones, I don't feel like it tonight, and then logging off.
No, I completely
Yeah.
agree with that. In SSF, in 1 week, including the time it took me to re-roll a character, I have full completion except for Vinctar Square and the Doriani's map, which is unheard of for me. Usually I could be like a month into a league and still be missing a couple of random maps I hadn't been bothered to fill in, because like it's just completion. Who cares if it's like I'm missing 2%? Whereas now it's like I must get every single passive. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's cool that, yeah, from a SSF point of view, that you can do it that well, which means that I've seen the sentiment a lot from trade league players as well. Like they've managed to get everything filled in without having to trade, which I think is really cool. For the people playing in trade, was that something you filled in yourself naturally, or were you going out buying maps, or how did you do it?
We used to have to buy for sure, but now it's gotten better and better over the last few leagues. But this is definitely like you don't have to trade for maps now at all. Like
I traded for like
Kirak's got you
3.
covered. Horizons, you traded for some? I'm surprised, honestly.
Oh well, it was just like guild swap.
Yeah, that's what we do in our
So-
community teams. We swap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's much easier to fill out now.
Co-op as well. You mentioned your solo self-found improvements. Co-op improvements are amazing. It feels so much better. When Z and I used to play it, I would just not allocate my region passives. And if I needed to keep up, then I'd have to like go buy a watchstone, because it was way too much hassle for me to go get all of that and then bring it back and then do my Maven fights in the region, whatever. It was such a hassle. Now it's just like, yeah, Ziggy's finished for the night. What can I do? What's fun for me? And I have it all unlocked. And it just goes. It's great.
Player 2 does not fall behind on progression at all anymore, which is fantastic, because what happened before was you had to break up your party every so often so that they could go do their conquerors. So they would have to go spend hours outside of the party to ensure that their Atlas progression didn't fall behind. Or like you said, like buy a bunch of watchstones and like simulate just kind of skipping that mechanic entirely. But now it's like almost entirely 100% shared progression, and even most of the influency stuff you can do together. In fact, we learned that we got the invitation to the boss, or it was one of the bosses or one of the Maven things or something like that, and we ran it together and we're like, oh, but we both got credit for this, which is good, but we kind of wanted to do the fight twice. So we're like, oh, we should do it separate so that we can do it twice, because this is fun content. But it's surprised us how it actually worked, because that's not been the case in the past for stuff like that.
I mean, it's better that that's the default, and then you have the option to do it twice if you want.
Way better, way better.
No, that's
fantastic.
Cool.
Caught us off guard though, yeah. No, it's fantastic co-op improvements. Best mapping experience we've ever had for co-op and also in general, I think, in Path of Exile.
Yeah.
Well done, GGG.
So with that in mind, Amie, what did you think of the new bosses?
Okay, Blackstar. No, I really want to go kill Blackstar by myself. I died and just laid on the ground while Ziggy figured out the mechanics and managed to kill them.
We did that
with
one co-op,
seismic
yeah.
traps. Yeah, that was our first one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the first one we did, yeah. And I didn't figure out what the hell was going on with the mechanics until after I killed the boss. Which was just kind of bursting it down and like brute forcing through. So yeah, we definitely need to fight that one again, I think, because I want to see, like, I feel like the fight might be really fun now that I know how it works, but figuring out that fight, the Blackstar, was a bit, it's one of those, this is actually a classic PoE problem, where in order to understand the mechanic, you have to mouse over a tooltip up in the top left of the screen and read it
That's
in
my
the
rant
middle of
about
combat
it.
while things are killing you.
Yeah.
You can't read it outside of that situation. You can't go back to your hideout and read the mechanic. You have to read it in the middle of the fight while things are flying at your face. That's how you learn things in PoE. So
Actually,
yeah.
let's all focus on Blackstar. We'll do a full roundtable on Blackstar, then we'll come back around and do the other boss. Do you guys have anything more that you want to say about the Blackstar fight?
It looked very cool. And now that now that I think I know the mechanics, like I feel like it's gonna be really fun next time. Now that I know what to do, I was like, oh, that's a really clever mechanic. But yeah, oh, you like full spoilering here? By the way, I guess we are, right?
Yeah, guess what is
Okay, so the mechanic is there's a day and a night side that rotates around the arena. If you stand in, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you stand in the night side, is it that you get weaker to night but stronger to day, or weaker to cold and stronger to
If you stand on
fire?
cold,
Yeah,
you take increased damage from cold.
yeah, but you
And then if
get
you
more
stand in fire,
resilience
you
against
get
fire.
increased, from fire. So, and then
Okay,
you
yep.
like will block the same element, and then break the opposite element. But the
Yep.
danger is that if you try and hide behind a pillar, you're standing on the ground of the same element, and thus if you do get clipped or have to move, you've got more of the I take more fire damage debuffs.
So you have the choice of tanking it by absorbing the debuff and getting stronger to the element. So like standing in cold and then building up fire resistance.
Yeah.
And then he hits you with the fire thing and you just don't take too much damage and you survive it. Or you risk going into the side where you'd be weaker to fire, but you can hide behind the pillar. Is that right?
Yeah.
I thought it was actually, I didn't realize the pillars swapped like that. That's
Yeah, so
interesting.
as the line goes across, there's 2 fights that exist like this in MMOs. So I guess I came in with a little bit of advantage here. There's one like this in WoW. It's called Sisters of the Moon, and there's one in Final Fantasy 14. It's called like Tsukiyomi or something like that. Can't remember exactly what the arena is called, but they have this sort of same floor dynamic. And so like once I saw the floor start to move around, I was like, okay, I kind of know what I need to look for here.
You've seen this before.
But it's very familiar at least. And so the way that you manage those fights in the MMO is to stay near the point of like where the two halves meet. So like in the WoW fight, you would kind of follow the eclipse as it went across because it was like phases of the moon versus, cold versus fire. And similarly for the Final Fantasy 14 one, like you try and like manage your debuffs by stepping back and forth across that central line so that you would never stack up too much of either. And the bosses are melee oriented, so they do track on you to a certain extent. So you can actually kite them while seeing near like the line where the two buffs meet. But as far as the other one, like as far as knowing how the pillars worked and everything like that, I had to go back and like watch footage from my fight a couple different times to pick up on it.
I feel like the timing. Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Just like you're talking about that, and like that's so. It makes a lot of sense, but the timing on this particular boss, you don't get enough time to understand that there's that duo mechanics. You don't have like gentle attacks coming at you that you can feed it out with. I feel like really quickly there's the big ones that just shred you if you're standing in the wrong one compared to the other bosses where they'll build up to, hey, here's a big bullet hell or whatever.
And I think that's because it's not signaled very well. Because like what Ziggy said, you have this incessant need for the UI to be static in Path of Exile. This is something that they're not going to let us change. And I think that if you're going to have a static UI like this, then you need to think of other UI elements that sort of communicate these things better. If you're going to involve MMO level mechanics in boss fights like this, especially with the attack patterns that they have, she has very, very quick attack patterns compared to the other guy, like the Hunger, her equivalent on the other side. He's like slow, meaty guy with axe. Like you can see his attacks coming from a mile away, but then she clones herself and then she's doing, whichever attack and zipping around, and then it's a lot to focus on, and then also be like, oh, I have to stare at my feet, or no, I have to stare at this. And so I thought it would be really cool if they did like a sliding scale instead, like having a bar maybe between the two health bars with one side fire, one side cold, with a little indicator that just slides to show you how many debuffs you have. So if you stand too long in fire, it starts to slide to the fire side. So you go, oh, without knowing anything else about what's going on or having a specific number, like, do I have 13 stacks of fire? I can just say, oh, it's really fucking red. Maybe I should just not be red anymore. and then stand in the blue, and then it starts to slide towards blue. Like, you can communicate these elements of boss design inherently in a way that makes sense to a player, where they can kind of grasp the point a lot easier. Because I think that's the hardest part about the fight, is like, how do you deal with mechanics with the floor, and then the floor is something that takes several times to understand.
See, that's my biggest issue with all of the new fights, is I feel like Path of Exile's become more and more obsessed with gotcha mechanics with their bosses. Like, Maven had the memory game thing, which if you know it's there, it's still a skill check, but it's not as bad. But the first time you see that, you're like, I have no idea what's going on. Blackstar is my favorite of all of the fights now that I know them all mechanically. But going into that blind, there are so many things to track. You need to track a moving floor. First off, you walk in, why is the floor moving? Now there's a debuff I need to hover over. Oh, the boss has cloned herself. There are pillars. I need to hide behind the pillars. Oh, sometimes the pillars are destroying. Oh, my entire screen is full of avalanche and I've got one shot. Like, if this was in an MMO, you would have those abilities slowly ramping up. You'd also have a healer, meaning you don't instantly die the second the boss moved. And I think that's my biggest issue with doing these kind of bosses in Path of Exile. If you're going to just have all of these mechanics out of nowhere, there needs to be some kind of build-up for players to be able to go into them blind, because it's one of those things of... And this is why I do still like the Blackstar fight, is once you know the fight, you still need to do something. Whereas with a lot of the other bosses, in my mind, once you know what their gimmick is, then that's the only thing in the fight that can kill you. And the tuning seems so bizarre. Like, Blackstar seems consistently the hardest of all of the fights, in my opinion. We'll speak out the others later on, because every single aspect of her kit is a threat. Like, you have to manage the floor debuffs for her laser beam and the avalanche, but then her clones also complicate things, because her cold clone will beat the crap out of you if you're standing on the cold floor for too long. So it's like, it's insane the amount of mechanics they've put into this one boss fight, considering that the previous content you did to this was mindlessly running maps. The hardest mechanic you've encountered in a map is like reading a freeze line of text or a reflect line of text. Like, that's it. And now suddenly you've got to juggle all these a million different mechanics. I find that that's such a bizarre experience.
It's a problem with like inadequate amounts of signaling and like really bad scaffolding.
Yeah.
Because like the way you're supposed to break down a boss fight, or at least you're supposed to let a player progress through a boss fight, is what's known as scaffolding. And we kind of saw that with Cyrus, where like he would do like the little maze and then it had 2 rings and then it had 3 rings. Like, that's an example of scaffolding. But where we fall short on Dark or Blackstar is that there isn't any, right? She just does the 1, 2, 3, and you don't get any opportunity whatsoever to understand them. And if you do not have proper scaffolding for a site, then you have to have adequate amounts of signaling, and it's not there either. Like, we have some, because you can kind of see the outline of the beam attack before it happens, so you know that it's like targeting you, and you can kind of pay attention to like, okay, this is about to happen soon. And then there is like a brief delay, like 2 to 3 seconds between when she says her voice line for the avalanche and when it happens. So you have a little bit of time there. But there's nothing that teaches you about the avalanche. Like, why does it hit the entire arena at once the first time? Why doesn't it hit a third of the arena the first time, so you can see what it does and go, oh crap, I shouldn't stand on that, or I should do something about what's about to happen? Or like, why is the beam 5 beams wide the first time? Why isn't it just a single beam the first time? Like, there's ways to
be a little nicer.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have like higher health bars and more consistent structure to a boss fight being learnable than the other way around, of just having these sort of like clusterfucks of mechanics happening. And I just don't know where the balance is, because they seem intent on bringing these MMO mechanics into the game, but then they're not structuring the rest of the systems well around it.
Go on, Octavian, because you've been quite quiet. You went to go anyway.
It's okay. There's some tools that they use in the later boss fights as well that, like, you know, not even expanding, which I agree, expanded UI elements would be excellent. I would freaking love that. But like, not even expanding the tool set that GGG is currently working with. There's some things they use in the later boss fights that are just absent from the earlier ones. Like, one of the big ones is Maven is, you know, they're watching for all of these fights. And in the later fights, she'll say things like, you know, charge the orbs or whatever it is that you have to do with that.
Spheres.
Yeah, energize the spheres, or I will demolish them all when the bullet hell starts, or I'll extinguish them all, and then that that gives you a cue that you're supposed to go to the gaps in the bullets. For the Black Star fight, whenever you have like 4 or more debuff stacks, she could easily say something like, "Your blood runs too cold, champion," or "You are too spicy hot. You're a flaming hot Cheeto. Get out of there." Something like that. She could have helpful voice lines to help you try and decipher what the problem is that you're running into in the fight.
Speaking of not at all helpful voice lines, talking about Infinite Hunger, that fight is the worst thing I've ever done in Path of Exile ever. Screw that fight. Ugh, swamp phase.
I had enough damage to skip
Terrible,
swamp
terrible
phase,
signaling.
so I have not experienced
Absolutely
it yet.
terrible.
I'm a dweller of the
That's
swamp.
also another thing. The tuning on these bosses are so weird. So, as Amie is well aware, I league started a relatively low DPS league start, and it's odd how a lot of these bosses have these super gimmicky mechanics. I think Black Star is the most balanced because nearly all of her abilities have threats, but all the other bosses, they only really threaten you in very key parts of the fight, which if your build does damage, you completely ignore the only mechanic which hurts you. When I uploaded my blind boss footage of the swamp guy, a lot of comments unironically were like, "I didn't know there was a swamp phase. He just died." And it's like, cool.
I mean, yeah, if you league started like Seismic or something with real high single target damage, then I can see that happening.
My experience with Seismic was rather interesting. So I burst him down, and then the poop came for me right as he died, and then it claimed me and dragged me under, and I had to do the poop phase.
Oh.
And then I got out, and then I went to go over to look if he dropped any loot, and then the poop came back for me again and dragged me under again. And it kept coming back. It kept coming back. It was just endless. So I broke something in the fight by killing him at the same time as it or something. And I just had endless cycles of getting dragged under. And that was good.
Yeah.
Good thing he didn't drop any loot, eh?
So, who here did that fight blind? Raise your hand.
I did.
Okay, BK, did you work it out?
A little bit.
I couldn't, it was after a day or so after I finally took a hint about it, and everyone was like, "Oh, look, there's if you watch the flow," and I was like, "What the fuck is this shit?" It is so poorly signaled. And it's just how am I supposed to know or pay attention to what little poopy trails are doing what when first of all, the region in the poop is fucking harsh. There's constant enemy threats as far as all the little ads spawning on you. You're taking a stacking debuff. And then there's no mini map and no other sorts of signaling whatsoever. We could have a Katarina, in Katarina's fight, where it's go to the fucking corner and stand on this pillar until this section is closed off. Where's my green arrow telling me where the toilet is to flush myself out of here? There's nothing. It's just hop around on islands, try not to die anyways, feel frustrated, and then go back in and then kill him the rest of the way.
Yeah. How about you, Amie?
The flow doesn't even work sometimes. Sometimes it's a mess. You follow it and it's nope, that was a dead end.
Because if there's an island, it flows around it, which makes it flow backwards in the other direction sometimes. So
it's the way I did it is I followed the islands all the way to the left, and I saw a wall of bones, and I'm like, okay, I went the wrong way. Cool, I'll just turn back. And then I went the other way, and I hit a wall of bones, and I'm like, all right, what the fuck?
Yep.
So that was basically my experience. So the first time I went in, I'm like, oh, I'm meant to drown, because knowing you're meant to drown is already unintuitive. You're like, oh, arena shrink, stay on arena, not run into the mud. So I'm like, okay, I'm meant to run into the mud. So then I'm in an island. I'm like, I run into the mud again. Oh, I'm taking a really nasty debuff. I don't run in the mud. So I'm fighting on the island for a minute, and I'm like, this is wrong. I'm just killing enemies. So then I'm like, oh, I think I can see another island. So I chain blink arrow to 10 islands, and then I'm like, well, this isn't doing anything, and I hit a wall. So I'm like, okay, let's go in the other direction. So I go in the other direction, I hit a wall, and then I die, and I've got 80 of the debuffs. So I go and fight again, and it skipped the phase. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know why this phase is over now, but it's over. oh, I've still got these debuffs. That's interesting. So I go through and he does the swamp thing again. So I'm like, okay. So I'm not sure why the phase ended. Kill enemies for a bit. I actually saw that the mud was flowing. So I'm like, I'll go in that direction. I went in that direction and I hit a wall. So I'm like, oh, that was the wrong idea, Tarke. Let's go back to randomly chasing islands. I actually managed to work out the mechanic, but because I hit a wall, I'm like, that was a stupid idea, Tarke. They would never design a boss fight to be that unintuitive. It was clearly the islands, and you've got to kill a certain amount of enemies. So then I go back through it, and I ended up killing that boss the first time by just dying every time I got a swamp phase.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until I uploaded my footage, and then I had a bunch of people saying, oh, Tarke, you're so stupid. Clearly, you follow the direction of the mud flow, you absolute moron, and then a portal appears. And I think another thing which makes that so terrible is screw you if you've got any colorblind issues, because it's just the same color on the same color on the same color, and that's something that they've been told about so many times. And also screw anyone playing on low graphics settings, because I imagine that's only worse to see. Yeah, it's, as Octavian said earlier, when you have the other boss fights with Maven telling you what to do, it's so bizarre that you get absolutely zero direction. And it doesn't help that the big hungry guy just says, hunger, smush. And, like, none of his words mean anything. It's like, it doesn't, you know, it's like, at least with, like, avalanche, you're like, what could an avalanche mean? And then stuff falls from the sky. You can put two and two together. Wow. But, like, hunger, it's like, well, I guess that means hunger, I guess.
Cheeseburger.
Yeah.
I loved watching you scroll back up through the conversation of the fight and going, well, that's nothing. Like,
yeah, literally, at the end of the fight, I went and I looked through all the voice lines to try and make sense of it, because GGG normally does a really good job with certain bosses that, like, they say a line and you're like, okay, they say the line, this is the mechanic. So I even, like, I even tried to use the thing, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what this is. Yeah,
GG is usually way better about that. Like, die means the beam, you know? It's like, yeah, that's good shit. That's usually very clear, that sort of stuff, but not so much,
I don't know if it was just that I was, you know, I over-prepared and I was, like, more tanky than I needed to be for the fight, because I was playing an Inquis and I had gotten some decently tanky gear and I had, like, 7-point-something K EHP and tons of fucking regen. But literally everything else that man did didn't matter. I could just sit there and tank it all. It's just the swamp phase is the fight, it feels like. From what I've seen of other people playing it too. Like, most people, even, you know, somebody who's going in with like 4K life and stuff, they could just face tank his slaps. They could face tank his slams. Like, maybe the vomit move, if you face tanked all of that and didn't move at all, would be dangerous, but the rest of it seems pretty damn tame.
Yeah, when
it's
you
not
put
good.
it out,
It's
I
not
was
good that the whole
expecting
thing's gimmick. You know?
I was expecting something like Shaper's little extra bit, you know, like where you just fight the packs of normal monsters to get back. Like, when we got ported out, I was thinking, oh, okay, cool. It's like a throwback to Shaper, cool. And then I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought there'd be more eating. Like, this dude would eat some stuff. You know, like, Atsuri eats
swallow you and
her...
spit you out at a pillar or something.
Well,
Yoshi.
I was expecting him to eat his ads, because it's like his whole thing is hunger, and I'm like, oh, I'm in this place and there's all these little creatures, he's gonna like eat them, but he, like, no,
and then spit them at you. Blah.
Yeah, and
or like what if they would charge him up? If like the more that you kill trying to get back, it like
exactly, because that's what I was trying to think the mechanic was. But to your point, Octavian, so I did it for this second time earlier today, and I knew what the mechanic was, and I rolled it, like I alked it, hit a bunch of damage mods. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be really scary. Yeah, no threat whatsoever.
Even with damage mods, I figured that would make
even with damage mods, absolutely nothing. And my build's like 5k life, 1k energy shield, Ghost Shroud, Trickster. And like that's my that's my defense. And it was like absolutely nothing. And it was the same thing with Eater of Worlds. It feels like a lot of these bosses, outside of their gimmicks, they don't do anything, which is really weird. Well, like their auto attacks do nothing. Like you get clipped by their abilities, it's like 1k damage.
I guess outside of the I was about to say Black Star is pretty deadly, but the gimmick could be conceivably said to be.
If you dance on the center line and never stack up anything, and then just either have spell suppression for the various onslaughts or like really high regen, it's like it's nothing. Like you can just, if you dance along the line and like kite her to you, it's really just boring.
Okay.
I think it's very
Um,
odd compared to something like Elder. Like, if you took an Elder auto attack, like, he could just auto you
Yeah.
to death easily. Whereas with these guys, you can take some of their random strafe, actual, like, full-on mechanics. The Eater of Worlds, which we'll talk about next, has, like, a Crackling Lance ability. I did that fight earlier today with 100% extra damage. I got hit by it. I took 500 damage. I have spell suppression, so it would have hit me for 1,000. And I'm like, wait, what?
Oh dear.
Though,
1,000.
since we had some sandwiches earlier from our wonderful guest, I want to sandwich the criticism here by saying that the visual design of absolutely everything is goddamn A+. Like
Wait, on the hunger fight?
No, of basically everything. That is the one thing. The colorblind friendliness of the hunger fight is not very good. That could use some work. But like all of the bosses look badass as hell. And this is a very minor thing, but I love the hunger minions. They're this weird mixture of creepy and adorable that just nothing else in Path of Exile quite looks like it, but it does still seem to fit in Path of Exile. Like they've managed to innovate on creepiness.
Yep.
I want to adopt, but not look at this.
I want to keep them, but never look at them.
Keep them in
We're
a
burying
closet
the
under
lead.
stairs.
We're kind of burying the lead on the Hungry Poop Boy fight though, because I always forget his name. Is he the eater?
No, Eater of
No.
Worlds is the big
He's
jellyfish
Endless
guy.
Hunger.
He's the Infinite Hunger, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Infinite Hunger. Okay, so the
Something
Infinite
Adjective
Hunger. The best part of this fight is in the poop feast phase. He puts a stacking. You get a stacking debuff, right? That lowers your evasion and armor by I think 400 per
400
stack.
per stack, yeah.
And it's difficult to avoid having 10, 20, 30, 40 stacks in that fight unless you kill him before the phase even occurs. Now, the best part about this buff is there is no way to erase it. It doesn't go away. It doesn't seem to decay, at least as far as I can tell. And there exist mechanics in Path of Exile, such as Divine Shield, cannot recover energy shield to above armor. Also, I think Ghost Shroud has something similar.
Yeah, that
Also,
screwed me up on my
builds
first time round. Yeah.
Doesn't Dream Feather base its damage on your evasion?
Yeah.
Yes. Replica Dream
You
Feather.
literally just go to a 0 evasion straight away.
It is weird that they put mechanics in that just straight up disable certain builds.
Well, I think I have a tinfoil hat here. They didn't want to put defensive nerfs into the notes because they got such a strong reaction to nerfs.
So they just thought they'll make one boss fight?
No, not one boss fight, because there's reduced spell suppression at higher tiers now on maps. There's blind on maps, which lowers your evasion when you're blinded since the blind changes. There's enemies have the ability to suppress spells now. So they've added in a bunch of things that help
Reduced aura
to
effect
counter
is
these
another big
mechanics.
thing as
yes,
well.
Reduced aura effect, also an indirect nerf to determination and grace, which people expected to be directly nerfed. So they've sort of hedged their bets by still nerfing these things in a lot of different situations in the end game while not actually directly nerfing the tools.
Yeah, no, they've
Because
definitely
won't
gone
get
heavy
nerfed.
with the new map mods. Like, the new map mods are very dangerous.
We didn't get nerfed, the game got buffed.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. It's been lifting.
Wait, we love
for 3
buffs.
months.
Sorry, BK, you were going to say something before we went on to the next boss?
That's fine.
Okay. So right, next up then, Eater of Worlds. BK, what do you think of it?
The Eater fight is very pretty and then also very cool. Again, there's lots of I do consistently like that they're making the like debut of a lot of these new sort of like MMO mechanics. I keep saying that, but it's because that's what my background is in. So when I see that kind of stuff pop up, I get really, really excited and really, really happy. And I feel like that one was better paced than some of the other ones, like Blackstar, for example. Like she's just this like onslaught, and there isn't really scaffolding in that fight, but at least you get like the more consecutively dangerous stuff one after another. And I think the Searing Exarch does it too, where like it's this ability, then the big boom. And I felt like the Eater of Worlds did that same thing too. And it does get a little bit chaotic, but in an Uber Elder sort of way, because you've got the like little things, degen stuff that like chases you around, kind of like Maven's mechanic too. while you're trying to charge up the different spheres to then help neutralize everything. So it kind of has that chaotic squid poop arena feel that like improperly managing certain things on Uber Elder felt like. So I did like that. It was, I don't know. The Pinnacle boss fights, both of them feel really, really good and clean on their own, the same way that the Elder fight and the Shaper fight respectively did. And I'm really excited for them to smoosh them together next patch, I think. Because why else would there be 2 Pinnacle bosses, right?
Well, someone was telling me that the lore thing is that they can't exist in the same location, those two things, because they're like, oh, I guess the way I look at it is like one of them is like infinite energy and the other one's infinite hunger.
Yeah, a movable object meets the unstoppable force.
Yeah.
But we can take both of their influences and put it on a pair of shoes. Nothing
Because we're
happens.
special. We can
Ourselves.
defeat gods because we're the Nephilim, which is totally not lame.
The fight is very cool. I quite like that the Maven tells you exactly what to do during that one phase, which would otherwise be
I
a very
completely
annoying
disagree.
phase. And that, well, let me finish. And the fact that the visual of her orbs are very clearly differentiated from
Right.
the other ones.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, cool. This is Maven's helping us, especially because I did that fight after the other one where she very clearly helps you. So I'm like, oh,
Right.
Maven's trying to help us in these fights. So I was like, okay, following that logic, I do this, and I'll do what she says and stand on these things. The only thing that was a bit unclear about that was I tried to just stand on one to keep powering it up because it looked like it kept powering up. So I was like, I'll just keep charging it, I guess. And then I got exploded in one shot. So
Right.
it was
I
only
think
after a couple tries that I
constantly-
realized you have to like activate all of them.
So this is
All
what
the
I want to
movers.
say on that. I got really confused because she says energize the spheres, and he has his own spheres because a sphere is a fucking circle. So he has his spheres, and then there are these purple spheres. So I'm like, which sphere, Maven? Because they're both fucking
I mean, the
spheres.
Maven-colored one.
Well,
The
hers are
Maven-colored
darker
one.
Hers are purple. They
purplish,
look
I guess.
different. I realized there were different spheres that look
Oh,
different, but
no.
like my brain is like sphere, which sphere? So I first tried to energize his spheres, and then I'm like, okay, that's not it. That's technically different. That's like an orb, not a sphere. And then similar to you, Ziggy, I wasn't sure if I was meant to just like run through them because of, like they react to you running through them, or if you're meant to stand in them completely. And one thing that you can do is if you don't energize all the spheres, he doesn't do a complete AoE like one shot. You can dodge it. So the first time I did it, I tried to energize the wrong spheres, and then he did the charge. I'm like, oh, I can blink arrow to the other side. So I blink arrow to the other side, and I survived. So I never knew that the actual mechanic was you stand in all the spheres to stop it completely. So I was purposely like running through them all once, and then hugging the sides and making the fight a million times harder for myself. So then when I upload that footage, everyone's like, Tarke, you're the dumbest person I've ever seen. Like,
Oh, no.
what is your IQ? How can you not understand this super simple mechanic? So I went around, did it the second time, and I'm like, oh, this is like the easiest fight in existence. And I just, it's the gimmick thing. That's the only thing in the fight that damages you. None of his other abilities do any damage.
Just to clarify, I have a question because it seems like you have to be on the orbs for like a second or two to make them pop, but can you just run through them?
No, you
have
got to
a
stand in
visual-
them.
have
Okay, so you
visual.
pause on each one.
Right.
Okay,
There's
good.
like a little white flickering star that'll show up in
Yeah.
the middle of them when they're active, like activated
Okay.
for what she needs them to do.
And
or
the
for them-
ones you haven't charged have circles around them, like a stand in this circle sort of thing
They
that goes away after
do
you charge them.
react like if you just tag them, they react a little bit, which is what threw me initially. But they do like a slight glimmer, and then they do like a boom, and then it's like, okay, you've stood in it properly. You have to stand in them for like 1 to 2 seconds.
When I
Okay,
first
because
fought
you,
him,
yeah.
no, go ahead, Amie.
Oh, just because that's what I was doing. I've been able to activate them, but I wasn't sure. When you said run through, I was like, oh, maybe I can do this faster. But okay, good.
You had that
Wait
fight
for a
on lockdown. She one-shot the
Thanks.
fight. Nicely done. I do like how the drowning Orbus, firstly, that effect's very cool when you step inside them and the screen goes
Yeah.
crunches in on you. That's cool. It's
Makes
spooky.
you panic.
But they run away when you look at them,
Mm-hmm.
which that's very cool. That's a very cool. That's a good mechanic. I like that. You like turn your back and they sneak up on you. Don't blink. weeping angel
Weeping
fight.
angels.
Yeah.
I like there's the big tentacles is like a throw to one of the WoW bosses from last year, the big N'Zoth tentacles that slam across the arena. As soon as I saw those go up in the air, I'm like, these are slappy boys. I know exactly what this is gonna do.
Go on, Octavian.
I was just gonna say when I first did the orb phase of the fight, you know, he has the laser that he kind of follows you around with the growing circle. I thought I wasn't like supposed to go in that circle. I thought there was gonna be like a nasty degen or something in there while he was charging it. So I was trying very hard to avoid both the drown orbs and the circle and stand on the orbs, and it felt basically impossible. Turns out you can stand inside the circle. You just don't want to be in it when it explodes.
Well, I also thought that's what you meant to energize the spheres with, because that made sense in my mind. So I was like trying to kite the beam into this, and it was like, what?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like with a lot of these, it's one of these weird things where it's like it isn't as bad as like point and click adventure logic. Like the stuff makes sense. I feel like with all of these fights, if you actually just watch a video of the fight, you can work out what's going on. But it's very much one of those things of, I feel like when a lot of these mechanics are so binary and it is the only threat in the fight in my mind because the rest of the boss abilities are so undertuned, it feels kind of... I'm not a fan of fights where it's like, once you know the fight, you'll never die to it. And that's what these fights feel like to me now that I've gone through them and fought them like a second time. Whereas something like Uber Elder, you always have to respect it. I don't know if it's based on movement speed, but like the tentacle stuff never targeted my character. I don't know if that's because my character has like 200% movement speed, that it always felt like it was just behind me. But I was never close to ever being hit by a tentacle. I don't know. Do they damage you? Like, do they actually do any damage if they do hit you, or is it a 1k hit?
I don't know. I didn't get hit by him.
The big double tentacles?
Yeah.
The big double tentacle man move did like 1,000 damage to me.
Right, well,
I got hit by it once and then just face tanked it the rest of the fight. It did nothing.
Yeah.
But I was playing a build that I had designed for hardcore and then brought to softcore when I swapped. So it was kind of low damage and big tonk.
Yeah, but like that would be like, it should be the equivalent of tanking an Elder Slam in my mind. Like there's a difference between making like it should be
it was like tanking maybe a Minotaur Slam. That's what it felt similar to. So
I mean,
if you have like
armor,
crafting them, yeah, that's what I mean. It's hard to not feel a little initially disappointed with how kind of like quick they go the first time, especially if you're going in there with like a charge damage build. But like that's again meant to be scaled with map rolling and all that other kind of stuff. But I don't know. For me, I just feel like, and I'm probably the absolute minority when I say this, is like I just wish they were paced a little bit better. So like less crazy shit. Because with Uber Elder, each of them had like their series of attacks, and there's like opportunities where those overlap. But there was also like periods of time where you could actually do damage. And since like Cyrus, I feel like we've just had these boss fights where there's just like no downtime for players to actually like get an edge in. It's just like attack, or you're always doing something. And I like player uptime, but I like bosses that have like longer pace, like slightly longer pacing to them, where I don't feel like, I don't know, there's some sort of reward in my monkey brain once in between all of this, is like time just to wail on the fucking boss.
Yeah. Just to briefly, because there's people in chat saying, Tarke, like, why you campaign, just roll the map mods. The second time rounds I've been going through them, I have been rolling them. And even rolled with damage mods, they feel, in my mind, significantly easier than, like, Cirrus Awaken at 8. I'm curious, like, how do you rate this fight difficulty-wise compared to previous stuff?
Yeah,
these are definitely like easier than like most of the other bosses, I think.
Yeah,
maybe
for sure.
Say like
easier than Uber Elder, and certainly Uber than Cyrus 8. I've been doing them at like 50 to 80 quantity, and it's not a big deal.
We do, though, to play devil's advocate here, like, one, the new Atlas progresses you up through tiers a lot faster.
Yeah.
So, like, I would never have gotten to... Admittedly, I play, solo self-found or hardcore trade, which is basically solo self-found most of the time. So it took me a slower time frame to get there in the first place. So I would never have gotten to, like, old Cyrus 8 with a level 19 no quality gem and a 5 link. It's possible. People definitely could have done that. I'm not saying it wasn't possible, but most players wouldn't. Most players would have gotten to that point with like a 6 link and a 20 gem and maybe level 90 something. And pretty regularly now, I imagine you're fighting the new mini bosses, which are at least as grandiose as a Cyrus fight. at that point, with like level 18 or 19 gems and a 5-link. So it's a little bit more appropriate then at the quests when you're there at the quest line. And second, like, we do have things like Feared, and now things like whatever the full Conqueror fight is called. I haven't dropped
No,
one. I
that
don't
one
know.
is, oh my god.
Yeah, and we have, obviously, we still have Twisted and Hidden and Formed and all that. So, like, there is this echelon of extremely disgustingly challenging content way up at the top. And the bosses are fun for the most part. I don't know. I feel like I'm of two minds here, because one, I want to have to think about dodging the big goddamn tentacle slam looking ability that looks like it should one-shot me and send me to oblivion. But two, it's kind of okay that there's these sort of more mid-tier difficulty bosses.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you want bosses to, like, at a baseline be accessible, but I think the scaling is kind of where it loses its place. Because at least, like Cyrus 8, we had the Watchstones adding those extra layers of difficulty each step up. Like, whether it was, I don't exactly remember how he scaled. He wasn't my favorite boss fight. So I just was like, whatever. But like the different Watchstone, was it more based boss life in addition to other stuff? Like, how did he? Because I just put him at 8 and then I always farmed it at 8. But the progression from 0 Watchstones to 8, I don't really understand that step up.
It would scale. It had like sort of a jumping scale. It wasn't quite
That's
linear.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, they're wanting map mods to do that, but I don't think map mods are enough to really deliver that same sort of like steady increase of power that we had with the Watchstone system. Like, sure, it can make it crazy hard, but it's not any harder than having a really badly rolled all fight where he, can crit you a bunch and you just have to not get hit or whatever it is that he has. And so, like, I maybe they need to kind of push it through some other sort of progression system where you can kind of like throw in that extra baseline difficulty that then gets multiplied by the map mods to actually feel impactful.
I mean, one of the things that made Cyrus 8 or 9 way more difficult as compared to previous ones was just the fact that in the final phase he started with way more health. That's like not something a map mod really replicates, like a sort of mechanical change in the fight.
Yeah. Let's jump onto the Searing Exarch, and then we can do like a comparison point. Amie, the Bullet Hell Queen, what do you think of the Searing Exarch fight?
Actual god gamer.
Well, I feel like I'm a pretty average, like, especially on this podcast, I'm probably the least experienced. I panic a lot during boss fights. So just before I lead into this fight, about all of them, I'm really glad that they weren't super hard and I could get my Void Stones and had fun with big boss fights, because I love them even if I like get sweaty and shaky and cry afterwards. Yeah, no, it was really nerve-wracking. But I really enjoy it, and I think if you're like me and you're trying to stay alive and a bit scared, and maybe don't have seismic trap DPS, the fight can, like, at the end it's really chaotic. There's stuff on the ground, there's the balls coming from everywhere, and at this point you're shaking and crying and sweating, and you start to lose track of where the orbs are going. I still really enjoyed it, though. I think that was well telegraphed, like, compared to the first two. This one was so much easier to understand. I watched Ziggy beforehand, but I feel like even this one, I would have been able to, like, understand it straight away.
Yeah, I did that one fully blind, and it was such a clear... It was my favorite of all of them. It was such a clear, clean fight, very well communicated. Maven's obviously helping you, shows you exactly what you have to do. It was really cool.
I think that one's the best done as far as all of them, as far as incorporating MMO elements and then signaling them correctly for an action RPG.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that come down to differences with MMOs too. Is like when we have add-ons that yell at us that a certain attack is coming, or we need to run or stack or whatever. And then 2 is the ability to move the camera, which you just don't get in an isometric. So like things have to be very cleanly signaled, and we have that done perfectly here.
A little bit off topic, but one thing that sort of struck me as weird is that you don't have to do the mini bosses after the first one. I mean, if they have loot that you want, they could be worth fighting, but you can just fight the big guy again, right? Like you get a mini boss invitation the second time you go around when you're halfway through the progress to Searing Exarch or whatever, but you can just say nah and go fight Searing Exarch once you get there. I don't.
Yeah,
I did it when I got it because
No.
I'm like, it gave me the thing, I run the thing, but okay.
No, I think you could just ignore the mini bosses and just kill Searing Exarch whenever you get it.
When that passive was bugged, that would sometimes reward you extra step of progression. It was bugged so that it would skip the invite sometimes. So if it procced on the last one,
So if you
it
went
would
from 9
skip
to
the
11 or
invite.
something like that. Oh.
So it's like 14, I think, that you get the mini boss invite. But if you went from like you just skipped 14, went straight to 15, you just wouldn't get the invite. But yeah, you could still go on and then do the major boss apparently in that situation. So as long as it didn't skip the major boss, which could happen apparently.
I mean,
you now though at least
you sort of could do that before in a trade league by just like buying the fragments for Shaper or Elder or something. But you know, somebody ran those to unlock that Shaper. As
I'm
it stands,
so happy it's itemized now. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very happy it's itemized. I'm just surprised that like there's an item for the Searing Exarch instead of a fragment or an item that you get from the mini boss that lets you go to do Searing Exarch.
His entry ticket is his entry ticket. It's not made up of a bunch of little pieces of entry tickets that you smush together.
I trade my bottom left for your top right. Yes.
I mean, they would have to have more mini bosses to make it multiple pieces, I guess. So for the vision of what they wanted to accomplish, that does make it harder. And like, how would that even work? So you'd do the mini boss and you'd get a fragment, but then you'd still have to run 10 more maps to be able to use the fragment?
Okay, stop, Octavian.
No, don't give them bad
I mean, I see why it's
give them
the
good
way it is now.
ideas.
I will say these bosses work quite well as like introductory bosses to late end game. Like they are, I think it seems positioned as being that like they're a bit more accessible, they're much easier to get to. They actually kick in as like literally the first tier 16 map you do is when you get the boss fight, rather than it being like after you run 20 of those. So they are kind of like the introductory to that late game, and then like after you do them, then you're doing your Maven Witnesses and you started to get Conqueror maps after you've done them, and then you start going to Cyrus and Conquerors and Elder and all that sort of stuff. I think they work pretty well in that role.
Stones.
I feel like it's sort of once you hit that first couple of bosses down post T16s, it flips a switch and suddenly the game is just so much more content dense with all those bosses that you mentioned, but also there's influence in every single map you run if you're doing T14 plus. Like you get to this point where it's just like suddenly Path of Exile has twice as many monsters and there's a million bosses to go fight. Run wild.
Yeah, to back it up to something Ziggy said though, I just realized it when he said it that I remember across many different podcasts, everyone bitching about how you couldn't do your white conquerors again. And like, here we go. We've got these little tiny bosses that you can just leave them unrolled and you can test your builds on.
That's awesome. Also, another good point about that is if you fail while you're doing your first encounter, you can apparently just do one map again and get the invite right away.
Yes.
So you can,
that's very good.
So if you're nervous about going to these fights for the first time, just try it, because literally one map later you can do it again if you fail.
I experienced that when I died to my game going to 10 FPS in the middle of the Black Star fight. Yeah,
that's so good though. Especially like it's fair that that's not the case like later on when you've like got them on farm, you have to like work towards it more and there's like something to lose is cool. That's a good thing. But like while you're first learning them, having this forgiveness to learn them is so good, because that's the thing I hated the most about Cyrus. Is like when I failed Cyrus, I was done for the day, because I was like, oh god, it's gonna take so long to get them again.
To get back to him, or 32 maps to get back to him, whatever you roll. That is awful.
I mean, even later on, all you're taking on is the like currency risk of the fragment, because assuming you're in trade league, because if you fail it, you could buy another then if you wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can just do it whenever you want. You don't have to like.
Yeah,
you can
I just
buy them and do them.
I just 4 or 5 more this morning.
One thing I will say on that though, one thing I'm not looking forward to when I go through on my next build is that yes, while we have this whole thing with the Conquerors, I'm gonna have a fully spec'd Atlas, which is gonna be a little bit depending on like how you spec your Atlas in terms of difficulty and stuff. It's like if you make a brand new character, I don't really want like King Harbies in the first map I run. Probably not.
That's true.
Really? You don't want triple pack size abysses?
Probably not. No.
How do you even have all of these like regret orbs and orbs of making and stuff, Tarke? Because you bankrupt me with the swap to crit on Deadeye.
Wait, this
Some of the extra little shit cupcakes she's
it's
sliding
not
in here
that
at
it's
the
not
end.
that bad.
I thought you were
of a-
done.
It's
But
not that
she's
much for a
No, I got it.
I've done a lot of. I've probably spent maybe 80 orbs of unmaking on my Atlas tree, and like done a little bit of respecking on my. I've done like a lot of.
That is incredible.
I've done a lot of specking on my Atlas tree because I did like a full betrayal spec first, and then I did a bunch of maps with betrayal. I then spec'd up betrayal, did a bunch of stuff with harvest. I'm now like completely rerouting my tree so I get all the Eater of War stuff on the right, but then also I get all the pack size on the left by dipping through the middle of the map. Because stacking both of those pack size influence things are so unbelievably strong, because that's just 40% pack size and the new stuff is just ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. I pick up regrets and then I use them. So my SSF secret, you pick up the currency. People say that a lot in SF. Like, how do you do the thing? I'm like, I pick up the items.
This is sus.
I played the video game.
Yeah.
It
It does
sextants that drop extra regrets.
It does help that my current build is a 200% movement speed Queen of the Forest Corsair carry character, so I can do a lot of map in short time. I go in the map. The map is
so
over.
reroll is the answer, Tarke. Yeah, you want regrets for your passive tree? Reroll.
Yeah, easy.
Again.
Easy. Just make loads of characters. But going back to Searing Exarch though, I have to like echo the sentiments of the others. I think of all of the fights, that I think is the fight where I'm like, yes, it works. All the mechanics are very clearly telegraphed. Everything about it is very straightforward. It has some lulls in the fight where it's like high intensity, lower intensity, so you kind of get that breathing space, which is important. It has the ramp up as the bullet phase gets more and more intense. If we had to rank the 4 new bosses from favorite to least favorite, how would you guys rank them? I'll just start. I would say Searing Exarch, Blackstar, Eater of Worlds, and then Infinite Hunger in like a different continent, because screw that fight a million times.
Exactly. I agree 100% with that ranking.
I think I would reverse Blackstar and Eater of Worlds. I actually kind of like Eater of Worlds. Got a few issues with it, but I think the fight's pretty cool overall.
Yeah, you can get under it.
Second for me.
My one somewhat unrelated thing, but my favorite thing about the Searing Exarch fight is actually not any of the mechanics or anything like that. I agree with you entirely. They're excellent. But when Maven shouts, "I will extinguish them all," and then extinguishes like maybe 3, that's great. I love it.
If you make it to the really late phases, she keeps
Kids
going.
think they can fly too, man. Just don't
Trying.
jump off anything.
She just doesn't want to speak in sentences. She doesn't understand what all means.
I will extinguish them all. She's got ambition. I'll give her that.
I
I
can eat
think
all
he
my
talks
dinner.
back to her too when she tries. She's like, "Oh, come on." He's like, "No, you won't." He gives her shit right back for it too.
She's trying good.
I thank her every time.
I do find it
Thanks,
odd
Maven.
though that the Blackstar mechanically is so much more dense than either of the Pinnacle bosses.
What is
Pacing
that?
wise, it's pretty heckers. Yeah, I really want to do that one again. That's the one we have the least experience with, because after that fight, we decided Amie and I should do them separate and then have like the time with them. So like I'll do it, Amie watch me, and then she'll do it, and then I can watch her. But we didn't do that for the Blackstar. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to Blackstar and trying it some more.
Yeah.
Can we talk about rewards? So for the
Yes.
sub Pinnacle bosses, non-existent. They don't drop anything. Anyone else have a different experience?
I get some of the
They didn't drop any
currency
currency
from
for
time to
me.
time.
I feel like they
And-
should have guaranteed drops of the currency, because the
I think
currencies
so
are being
too.
handed out in maps,
Yeah, it's weird.
and I think that's
Mm.
great. They should just do that. Especially they've designed this tiering system so that they could do that. So they could just be like, here, have 5 lesser.
It's
Eldritch
honestly how
Embers
I
or
thought it
whatever.
was, because the first 3 Black Stars that I did after, like when I started to farm them, it was like currency. I'm like, oh, nice little consolation
Wow.
prize. Like maybe I don't get the unique, but I got the currency. And then I went back to do the hunger ones, and it was like nothing. I was like,
Hunger
You ate all your
easy.
loot.
some?
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Oh,
Flushed.
I might be lucky. I've gotten quite a lot of like Eldritch Exalts and stuff. The first time I did Hunger though, it was like magic items. Like my filter didn't show anything. I pressed Alt and I'm like, oh, that was the loot.
Have you guys been running I haven't done a lot of the mini boss fights. I just got through my first round of fights, and I've done like 1 or 2 other ones because I did the restart, so I'm a bit behind. So have you guys been running them with the points assigned that cause them to drop more currency more often, or not?
Yep, I've got all the bossing
beeline for those.
sure.
stuff, and I'm rolling them at like 50+ quantity.
That is surprising to me. Then I would have thought they'd drop it like basically every time with those.
Yeah,
I feel
out
like
of
we learned
8,
this
out of
that they
8, I
should
got
have
3.
guaranteed drops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of the other bosses have
Yeah,
had a guaranteed drop.
I mean, at least
Consolation
because there
prizes
was
help a lot.
bases, right? If you went and fought, Alhazmin, if you didn't get a woke orb or something like that, or a Hunter's Exile, like there were always like a collection of useful bases. So something, and if not bases, then at least currency, and maybe not the best one, but at least greater.
Yeah, they could have gone the bases route.
It is
Easily.
weird they didn't do that because when you run the maps, they shit the bases, and the bases are worthless. Like, no one's stopping and hovering over every base. They could have just made every base that drops off them be influenced.
The ones that drop in maps have, like, maybe a greater, a grand version. But you could have had, like, you could have had an exceptional base or something.
I get so many, like, I enter the map, I look at a monster, I'm not exaggerating, literally 1,000 influence bases drop, Octavian.
Oh my god.
I look at the other pack and another 10,000 influence bases drop. And I'm like, look, I'm not hovering over every single one of these.
And how many regrets drop in that space?
At least 1 million. I'm clicking and it's like, He
just changes his tree out every map. He just has that many. No, the one thing that actually kind of makes me a little bit mad, if we can just briefly touch on the new modifiers, is that I like the idea that they're doing things that scale your damage specifically to bosses, or making these sort of boss-specific mechanics. But the fact that they exist for bosses only, but don't have any sort of like retroactive effect, like, so you have to choose. It's either I have 16% fire exposure or 13% fire exposure at all times, or I get 19 on a boss. Like, why do I have to choose? Why can't I just have like 13% fire exposure with 20% increased effect when fighting a pinnacle boss? And if you like use that currency, it adds the ability to like of how much you kick the unique guy's ass. And that's the only thing. Like, I don't like having to like. Are they trying to make people build boss sets of gear? Like, I just don't understand the purpose of it.
The one that really confused me was I saw on a chest you can get 90% reduced reflect damage taken while in the presence of a pinnacle boss, and I'm like,
very farming set,
I saw some stuff like that,
and I'm just like, wait. So the only use of that is if you can roll reflect on the bosses, which maybe you can. I don't know. I haven't sat to try and roll reflect on them, but in the case of surely you can roll reflect them, you just use 1 chaos rather than have a spare 6-link in your chest that you're like, oh, I've got my spare 6-link chest for the reflect setup. Like,
Also, what does in the presence mean? Is that like nearby? Do you die to reflect if you step too far away?
No, it's different words than nearby.
Can't be nearby.
But what?
It's not around either.
I don't know if I trust that. If I was on hardcore.
In the presence of 1 screen, 2 screens.
Also, it's not 100% reduced reflect either.
And my favorite.
And if the enemy shocks you.
Yeah, the fact it's not 100%, and also my favorite is some people in Chain mention, no, items sell for much more to vendors while in the presence of a pinnacle boss. That is a good one.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
There's
that's an Easter egg. So if you craft that with a fossil and then add influence, it can give you that.
That's
it adds the I think that's like an Easter egg they added, which is hilarious.
Because there's 1 or 2 of them that actually like make sense in terms of bossing. Like the one that I saw on an item the other day was your wither stacks expire less frequently in the presence of a pinnacle boss. I'm like, okay, that one makes sense. So why aren't they all? If you're going to change them or make them different, like why aren't they more geared towards an actual bossing situation? Rather than it be make number bigger for boss guy.
I think.
Is there a list of pinnacle bosses anywhere in game as well? Like, what is a pinnacle boss?
No, it's obvious, Ziggy. Just think, pinnacle.
The pinnacle map, got it.
A pinnacle boss.
Yep.
Pinnacle boss.
Yeah, there's a map called Pinnacle, right?
Yeah,
the map boss of the pinnacle map, got it.
Pinnacle boss.
Yeah, that in game. That needs to be in game.
Well, someone in chat's like, Pinnacle Bosses are the big bosses. You're like, okay, what's a big boss? Like
Is
someone
regular
asked,
Atziri Pinnacle Boss?
someone
or
in
just-
chat asks, is Atziri a
Maven,
Pinnacle
your
Boss? And
Elder,
someone says
Strange,
no.
Dark,
Like,
and
wait, so
your World
Atziri's not a big
Lord.
boss?
Are Delve Bosses Pinnacle Bosses?
No.
What about when we do the big 4-way Guardian Maven fights? That feels like Pinnacle content.
A
Oh,
Conquerors?
yeah, doing like a Twisted or something?
Oh, twisted.
Conquerors and Shaper Guardians Pinnacle Bosses?
Duh. Do you even have to ask that question, Ziggy? Oh my god.
If you don't know, you probably can't afford it.
That was good. I liked that one. Does anyone have anything else they want to say about the Atlas system before we start talking about Archnemesis as a mechanic?
The rewards on the bigger bosses are a bit better, but I also think they should probably have something guaranteed too, because I have seen people getting nothing from them as well. I just think that's such a bummer. You just make them drop
I
some
do
little
like
stuff.
that
That's
they
fun.
took the Watcher's Eye and split it in half and gave it to both of them. Because,
How
you
rare are
basically-
those? Because I've had some drop in SSF. So am I
haven't
lucky
seen
or
them
I'm not
yet.
lucky? And I've
So
unplugged
probably-
my headset, so
Can't hear me reply. Excellent.
You can't hear it.
I can hear you again. Yeah.
You-
Sorry,
How
how rare are
I'm
they?
saying something completely brilliant. Oh wait, shit, you're back. I haven't seen one yet, and I think I've done close to, I'd say 20.
Oh, I got
of
lucky
the
then.
list.
Yeah, I got one my first kill.
Yeah, same.
Very surprising. I expected
Yeah.
them to be decently
I
common
like
because
that
they're
the ones that I wanted were cheap. I spent 150 chaos, and now I have explosive expert in addition to my other
Yeah.
4 chapter points. So I'm
Pretty cool.
fucking
Congrats on that.
happy.
yeah. That's what I was
They're,
gonna say. Like they're surprisingly cheap. A good number of them
Yeah.
are.
I mean, not Profane Bloom. That's like 20 exalts each half, but
Mhm.
but you know, a lot of the other ones
I mean, it's
that are like
better
less
than
meta.
the, double multi jewels that I'd buy for that slot, anyways, right? So 150 chaos for what would be something I would go for. It just was it's actually cheaper.
There is so much pressure on jewel sockets on builds now, though,
Yep.
because you've got timeless jewels, you've got cluster jewels, you've got, the 6 property abyssal jewels. If you get really lucky, you've got these new ones that give you ascendancy points. You got a Watcher's Eye, and then rare jewels are still pretty good. So, and like they added a couple weeks ago, they added a bunch of rare mods on jewels that allow you to do things like cap stun avoidance or cap ailment avoidance, which you might need
reduce curse
certain
effects and
builds.
all that stuff.
Yeah. So it is so hard to pick what goes into a jewel socket now. Oh, do I get a 2-mod Watcher's Eye or another ascendancy point?
Yeah. One thing I have to say, massive respect to the YouTubers who are putting out their like elementalist occultist guides, as if that's a thing. Yeah, it's like, hey guys, insert person here. I spent 60 exalts getting these 2 jewels. People comments like, can I do this on a budget? Yeah, mate, you can definitely do your occultist elementalist buddies on a nice little budget there. Have fun with that. Yeah.
I feel like the end game has opened up for me with this Atlas and the bosses adding in the Void Stones. Like, I'm gonna try Maven. I don't think I ever actually beat her in the past. The memory game Can
we talk about how bonkers it is that the entire Atlas is T16 when before they're like, you can have an Elder Orb, you can have one.
Yeah,
Like,
choose
you can
your
have a couple
maps.
tier 16 maps. Now it's like, fuck it. Just take them all.
I feel like fuck it
Maybe
was
pick your favorite one and we'll make it like really a lot more likely this time. We give up, whatever.
like that was. It just seems like kind of the slogan
After
of the
fighting with
patch.
us about don't run one map, run all the maps. Okay, fine. You can run one map. All right, we'll make them all 16. That's fine. Okay.
Actually, have you what you want.
That's one thing I want to
Player
ask
base.
before we move on to Archnemesis. What's everyone's favorite map and why?
I have gone for Infested Valley because the new div card that gives you 10 incubators drops there, and it's rather common, and it's just kind of fun to see what pops out of it.
Fair?
And it's a nice linear layout.
I like port is hard ingrained into me from the delirium times. I really like port, and the div cards aren't half bad. You can get it pretty chunky in there.
Amie?
I keep swapping mine around. Which, like, as far as
That wasn't the
micromanagement is
format of the
concerned-
question, Amie.
Sorry, well,
This
Yes.
rebel.
I ran June for a while, or like June plus one. We didn't have that many unlocked when I was running my own maps. Otherwise, like they're just Ziggies.
Hmm.
So I've been trying to farm the Archnemesis like frenzy thing, or Soul Conduit, like trying to find my Archnemesis bits and then swapping my favorited maps to where they may drop, depending on this one person on Reddit saying they found a cannibal dropped a frenzy.
It's a whole
Right.
can of worms.
Hunting cannibals. I like how easy it is to swap them. That's so much nicer than all of the region shenanigans.
Yeah. Ziggy?
I quote Scully a time in chat, Strand is back, baby! With all the, because Strand's got shit density, but when you add like guaranteed things to it, it's like, I have guaranteed giga abysses and guaranteed harbingers and shrines and strong boxes. It's like, it almost doesn't matter that whether there's mobs in the base map or not. The map could be empty and I still have plenty of map going on at this point. So
See that's exactly what I was talking about earlier with like the insanity of the altars. Like the amount of influence mods is so crazy that if you actually said Strand is a completely empty map, yeah, you could still have a good time running a completely empty by default map.
People would probably still do it.
Yeah.
As long as you're not like delirium juicing or something like that, where you want some map content in there already.
I am curious as to which map is best for Delirium now that Tropical Island isn't on the Atlas. I was going to test that a little bit.
You know, I guess on the flip side, Strand is
pretty
long,
good.
and that can help Delirium, can't it?
Mine
I don't want to go Grayscale.
is Ashen
Go Tarke.
Woods because I need a level 4 Enlighten, and there's a div card supposedly
Yep.
that drops there.
From
I
the
wouldn't
boss.
know because it doesn't fucking drop, but
Yeah.
there's supposed to be a div card that drops there.
I've always liked that map.
It's
that
a good
one's
layout.
The boss isn't nasty.
Anytime anyone says it, it just makes me think of Dark Souls. Someone's going Ashen 1.
Right, Arch Nemesis. Who wants to talk about the UI first? Go.
So my experience with Archnemesis is really limited because I pushed into trying to get set up for bossing as soon as possible. And I go, okay, I'll go check. You know, we have like a little PoE resources section on our Discord. And so I started clicking through that and I see all these like web charts and flow charts and Excel spreadsheets. And I go, oh boy. And then I go to Reddit and it's just like rawr. And I was like, oh, I think I should probably wait for this to do like the 1 week update and then engage. So I've memorized one recipe that I like. And then I just pick up the pieces for that one. And then I just do that only.
What is your one recipe?
It was the Innocence Touched one. I just basically keep my eyes peeled for Sentinels and Frenzied. And then I just kind of like mindlessly go through my maps.
I will say quickly, very well done, Ziggy. Apparently,
just installing my new background.
Yeah, very good. Apparently, the Enlightened card no longer drops from Ashenwood. That's good to know.
God, dweeb.
Absolutely crushing.
Where does the Enlightened
new favorite map, Tarke?
Where does the Enlightened card
Friendship
drop?
ended.
Where does
with
it drop
Ashenwood.
now? What is my new favorite map? While chat works out what my new favorite. Apparently, it doesn't. Wait, they just deleted it from the game.
This item can be acquired in the following areas: Crimson Temple, according to the Good Wiki.
Right, Crimson Temple, new favorite map. Let's go.
It's still, you know, might be wrong. It's the wiki.
It's fine. The information came directly from Octavian, so if it's wrong, I will blame Octavian on the next podcast. Octavian, what's your thoughts on Arch Nemesis League?
There's a lot of UI improvements that could be made, and a lot of them that take, you know, more or less development time. Things like an auto sort button would be fucking wonderful. Things like having them be a little bit more visually distinct so you can tell which is which at a glance a little more easily. But honestly, if they just gave me a second page so that I could put the things I want to use later in the second page and have the things I'm picking up go in the first page so they don't get all mixed together, then I would do the mechanic, because it stresses me out to open the window and see everything messy, and then I just close it again and I don't do the mechanic and I go to the next map, because it's more fun to just not think about it. And the only way I've been able to get past that is to just not care and throw random shit in. And like if it has a currency icon, I put it in, and I know I'm doing it wrong. There are people who are in my chat telling me you're wasting things. You could be getting more out of this. But if I care about that, then I start to hate it. because the system is so messy inherently and hard to organize correctly. So the only way I can engage with it is if I don't care about the mechanic and just kind of throw things at it. Because right now, if I actually tried and cared about organizing it and all that, I would go insane.
Yep.
Yeah, my experience was pretty similar to that. So I made a real conscious effort for the first few days of the league to keep my Archnemesis window as tidy as possible. So when I started uploading my first YouTube videos of the league, I'd usually comment saying, Tarke, why is your Archnemesis window so tidy? And people were like confused by that. They're like, you're doing it wrong. It should be like way more jumbled than that. You're clearly not doing the mechanic correctly. And I feel like you know the mechanic's poor when people are like, there's no way you're doing this correctly and it's that organized. Like, this is wrong. It wasn't tidy. It literally had nothing in it. Yeah, because I was running it correctly, and when I got stuff in there, I was putting anyway. So I've now gone the other approach of hoarding, waiting for the right recipes to pop up. But now I'm like forever juggling like 2 open free slots, which feels really stressful and really irritating. And another thing which is irritating is I try and put the nice recipes at the bottom, but then you accidentally use something at the start, and then one of your good recipes gets like lost in the jungle of things on the first like 3 rows, which yeah, it's
It's just really disappointing because there's so many crafting games out there, and even heck, the bestiary tab with info is done better, and I'm really looking forward to the improvements that Beck said. Hopefully they're wonderful and we can just click things and we know what we're building up towards, and it's nice, but I don't want to get my hopes up for this.
You know what's wild though? This was originally meant to be a 5x5.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how the fuck did they like?
The funniest part is this is like they're like, oh, okay, so we'll make it bigger because we know you guys are hoarders, and it's like clearly they learned fucking nothing from our abilities to hoard from Harvest League.
Well, it's
you
not
remember
easy.
how many stations everyone had? Quad tabs and quad tabs of full stations. And they're like, let's give you 5x5. Oh no, we'll sprinkle a little extra on top. This is 8x8. You're gonna love it.
But it's not even hoarding though, because some of the recipes like, what is the actual total amount of combos you need to do for the big ones? I believe
that he had 2 per map, and I don't think they really factored in the crazy amount of juice that we were all gonna have.
Well, it's also
that's the biggest thing is like Chris really talked about how we'd have 2 per map, and I was on board. I'm looking forward to this mechanic that I only do every few maps once I've stacked up a few
when one
things.
pops up, it was supposed to feel special, not like, okay, well, yeah, that's not the one I need, and then let's see what else we get.
Ziggy and I are fighting over who gets to use in the map. Like, not
it's worse in co-op because we're both getting them, and only one of us is using them each map. So there's like 2 things going on. Like, we're getting way more than 2 per map for one. So it like spoiled for those. But then because when you do a recipe, you put 2 in and you get 1 back.
Yeah.
So your thing just gets more and more and more and more and more full. And finding like that, like I've got 8 of this tier 2 recipe that I've made that hasn't been used in anything yet, and like trying to go through and locate them, they're all over the place. It's like, yeah, I don't like that. And it's like
a lot of people in chat are saying like Innocence Touch is 31 sub. It's like a lot of these, and it's like you're not ever just building towards one because you can't choose what drops, because it might be like you start building one recipe but you're missing 1 piece, so then you start building another recipe but then you start missing 1 piece, so you've got like 4 big ones, and then it's like, well, I've got this like Arakali's Touched, which could be good if I get the other bits that then combo well with it, and it's just,
it's so frustrating to me as well, because if all of this was just not such a pain point, like if it was just smooth and easy and enjoyable to interact with the mechanic, I wouldn't have a single problem with it otherwise. I actually like really like the concept of it, of building up these complex recipes and having, you know, like middling rewards, slightly better rewards, maybe middling rewards, and then big thing that you were building up to. And, you know, also the fights are fun and challenging, and you can make them extremely challenging, especially if you decide, screw it, let's put it on a freaking, I don't know, Stygian Revenant instead of the little spider that's in the corner. Let's just put it on a Revenant instead. I want to die. So all of that is great. All of that is great.
Amie and I made an unkillable one to challenge our viewers.
There you go.
I used Arcane Buffer, so which is not Energy Shield, by the way, because apparently Chaos can't pierce through it, it turns out.
No, my Chaos build doesn't pierce through it.
Yeah, so we used Arcane Buffer. We used the
Trickster?
temporal one, which is a big temporal. It's like a proximity shield that's also 10 chains, which
Bugged.
is bugged, by the way.
Bugged.
So if the longer you spend in it, the longer it makes your cooldowns go. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second.
That's
We
spicy.
use Trickster, which makes it run away and avoid damage, and then we use Invulnerable as the final one. So it's only vulnerable 2 out of every 10 seconds or so.
Oh,
So we
fuck
put
you,
this
Ziggy.
abomination together on a spinny cage.
Oh,
So there's a
fuck
temporal
you.
chain
Oh no, they have
running
to
away with
play
its temporal chains bubble. Its energy shield is recovering as it goes invulnerable. So it's only vulnerable 2 seconds out of every 10. You get your energy shield down a little bit, and then it
Okay.
comes back up full. It goes down a little bit and comes back up
I
full.
can make it better.
And wait.
okay.
The best thing is, all right, so we got people in. I'm like, I want the Giga Juicers in here. And this person's like, I got 30 million cast on crit DPS, single target DPS. I'm like, yo, get in here, Juicer. Come on, let's go. He starts getting it. He gets the energy shield almost all the way down. It comes back up. And then he starts doing less and less damage each time. Less and less damage each time.
because
until
the
point where he's doing no
cooldown.
damage.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what's your cast on crit cooldown now? 1 second.
Oh
Nice.
my
Normal?
God.
Like 0.1 or 0.2 or something.
See, you
It's
could have made that even worse, Ziggy. You should have rolled it on a consecrated ground map. Fuck that map mod.
The map was easy too. It was a tier 14 with like no mods for tanking.
I
Oh,
love
yeah,
that you
ailment
can do that,
avoidance.
though. Like, I love that you can do that. That you can build these Frankenstein horrific monsters out of the League mechanic. You know, or you can tailor it. You could also go for relatively easy ones and just choose the easy base. It's like the concept and even the gameplay of the League mechanic is really, really good. It's just got an awful menu, and that shoots it in the foot.
Yeah,
I will disagree with you.
Yeah,
not on the menu
go.
side of things. I don't really care about the UX stuff too much. Like that's only like minor for me compared to some other stuff. I think reward wise, it's very rewarding. Like the reward level of this League mechanic is fantastic when you actually like make some recipes. And conceptually, I really like it. And I usually like complex shit. Like this thing behind me is fun. But I hate, for the most part, a lot of the mob modifiers that they've designed here. I feel like GGG took all of their worst design ideas and smashed it together in a league. So there is so much here to dislike that is anti-fun in my opinion. And I'm very concerned that a lot of these are going to go core as like modifiers for rares that we're going to see all the time. So we've got things that disable movement speeds and skills and slow, right? So one of them was bugged, but there's still a lot of things that disable your movement skills. And that stuff is never fun. That's one of the few skill mechanics that we have in Path of Exile. Most skill in PoE is knowledge and making builds and things like that. Mechanical skill comes down to very few actual things, and dodging stuff with a movement skill is one of the few things we have. So disabling those movement skills, I don't think is very good.
Also, quickly on that,
go.
Stuff like that doesn't work in Path of Exile because there are legitimate builds whose whole build is their movement skill. Like you're playing a blink arrow build? No, you're not, because your build is disabled. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so there's a lot of hard counters as well. So things that just disable ailments on the monster. So if you're an Ignite build or something like that, sick, have fun. There's Vampiric, and it disables Leech. If you're playing a Blood Magic build, you can't leech off the monster. There's the ones that disable your healing as well. If you're playing Righteous Fire, the Rejuvenation has a pulse or something that disables your healing. You drop to 0. You drop to 1 hit point instantly on your Righteous Fire build because it disables your regeneration. Like, there's so many unfun mechanics stacked here, not to mention things like invulnerability comboing with Rejuvenation, more triple stacking of healing modifiers like we've had so many times in the past, ever since Beyond, where we had triple regen stacked mobs, and then that was a mistake, and then we've had it again so frequently. It's like, it's concerning that we keep coming back to so many of these things that I think are a mistake, and then stacking them together.
They're really pushing the idea of stuff being shut off or bad. Like we've had this sort of like 3 leagues in a row now where we had the pillars from Expedition that would just like turn off entire parts of builds, and that would feel super bad. And they're like, oh, but it's a choice. And then we had it again with this previous thing too, where it's like, oh, well, I'm just
The
going to give
choice-
you random implicit modifiers that turn off your entire build. But hey, it's a choice. You put it in the Krangler.
Well, the choice thing is an interesting point, right? Because people bring that up all the time. They say, well, it's a choice. Don't put rejuvenation if you need leech. Except the entire mechanic is based around this, a recipe
Right.
system.
That's what I was getting
So
to.
you
It's
don't
like-
have a
it's like-
choice if you wish to engage in recipes, because you have to run them in order to make the recipes.
And
You can't buy the pre-made recipes. You have to run them.
also, they
around.
don't tell you what they do. Like, it's not like when
No, it
you
doesn't.
hover over Vampiric, it's like, by the way, if you're playing in hardcore, this doesn't work. Catmaster had a rip recently because of the Malediction aura, which just says weakens you. If you go on the wiki, Malediction is you take 50% more damage, which is quite a lot more damage to suddenly take.
Yes.
And then it's not just quite weakening.
Weakens.
Also, like, I didn't even mention one thing that I hate, which is lingering on death effects on the ground that stop you from looting, like hidden behind them. So, you know, toxic is bad enough. Design-wise, it's kind of cool that they follow you around and bonk down. Like, that's like, it's on the better end of the spectrum. But there's also like ice ground shit that the monsters will leave behind that you know, you're trying to loot. It's hidden by the loot labels that you're trying to pick up. And then there's on-ground stuff that's killing you.
It's particularly good whether they've gone, okay, so we're going to make the boss that drops 1,000 items, because the whole point is to make these bosses drop 1,000 items, drop the instant dot on the ground.
Yep. It's good. That's great.
Come get your unit.
And then, like, apparently a lot of these things are different to existing mechanics that you have immunities to. So I was like, I'll take maim hinder stuff. It's like, well, this isn't a maim or a hinder. This is a different kind of slow. And then there's like, okay, I'll take the ignite, the burning ground immunity. Well, this isn't burning ground. This is hot fire ground. I'm like, you're not immune to this.
I was going to bring that up. That is something which is particularly frustrating in Path of Exile. Especially, I think it's bullshit if someone whose job it is to, like, talk about Path of Exile and know Path of Exile. Like, Rise was talking about this recently. You can, like, forget one mechanic and be like, oh, this guy knows fucking nothing. But it's like, if someone with this much experience who's played the game for so long is like, oh, wait, this is the wrong kind of burning ground, then how the fuck are you meant to know what this shit does as a new player? Like, it's so unintuitive to be like, oh, burning ground, that seems cool. Wait, this isn't burning ground, but the ground is burning. And I'm taking...
That's sort of like my point about this entire Archnemesis thing is like, if we're going to redo rare monsters and rare monster modifiers, and the whole point was the fact that the existing ones were rarely communicated well or signaled well, and basically you never had any idea what was going to kill you. And then if you moused over the monster, it was like, hear ye, these be the map mods. And it was like a fucking page and a half of things that you didn't know what were anyways. And it's like, all right, so here we have this opportunity to create a like system where mods are communicated effectively, that they're interesting, dynamic, and then also challenging. And then it's like, actually, we're not going to, none of it. It's just going to be more chaos, more modifiers. You're still not going to know what's going on. And you're going to die in new and unfortunate ways.
Yep. Yeah, it's...
Slows are just...
Oh,
slows are just the most like worst feeling
Slows
thing in the game as
awful.
well, right? Like
Nothing.
conceptually, I think like
Zombies.
yeah, slowing us down
Why?
is a reasonable thing to increase challenge, right? Like okay, yeah, sure, but it just feels so bad to be slowed. It feels because it to me feels too much like something is not working on the game, like the game is broken in some way, like my internet is dying or it's stuttering or I'm having FPS loss. That's what getting slowed feels like. So I don't think a game mechanic should ever simulate the game being broken.
I feel like
ugh.
we've maybe just hit like a sort of tipping point or threshold, because I'll agree with you guys. They do seem to slow the player or reduce players' movement options in as a sort of challenge spice. I don't know. They just throw it on top of basically every League mechanic. Like Delirium has big nasty slows. There's vines in everything now. There's the slowing auras on rares and stuff like that. So it does sort of feel like we've hit a threshold where basically it doesn't matter what League mechanic you engage with. You're 50-50 to encounter a nasty slow. Whatever it is that you're doing.
It feels particularly bad as well when it comes to like building around it. It's like I chose to take the mastery to make my build immune to maim and hinder. I'm like, I'll feel really good about this because there are all these slows. And I took it and I'm like, I'm still getting slowed because this isn't a maim or hinder. And then it's like, you're then being punished for trying to build around immunities. And stuff
What
like
even
this
is a main and hinder in the end?
Yeah, stuff like this is fine if there are tools, but with a lot of this stuff, there just isn't tools. Like, you can't go for the Pantheon Burning Ground stuff, so not only is that confusing because it's the wrong kind of burning ground, you then, what's the workaround? Just build insane regen, which will then get disabled by the mod that removes your regen. And it goes into something, going back to the Exhibition thing, like, yeah, the Exhibition was very annoying from, like, this is now makes your Chaos build and do 0 damage because it's Chaos Immune. But Exhibition had the thing, as someone mentioned in chat earlier, their version of Curse Proof is different to Hex Proof, so Hex Proof doesn't work on, and it's
so
it's like, fuck off.
If you've ever played like a Dungeons and Dragons game with a really bad vindictive DM, it can feel like that occasionally, where you bring your character to the table and your DM is like, you're playing a rogue that can backstab people, and undead are immune to backstab, so the DM has made his campaign with a bunch of undead, but you got that one perk that lets you actually backstab and crit undead, and your DM is like, well, no, but these are mechanical undead, and you double can't backstab them. Aha.
My best example of that,
storytelling GGG.
My best example of that is when my DM realized that my monk could catch projectiles and throw them back, and then my monk was never targeted by a projectile ever again for the rest of the campaign. And it's like, cool, I feel so great playing this class, or you won't let me use any of my abilities. Like, what's that? My guy has good reach and can run really far. All the enemies are flying now.
Actually, in a kind of old school example of this within Path of Exile, I think they've changed it since, but one of the first like big angry rant videos I ever made on my YouTube channel was about Tar Ground as it relates to Counts Roots, because Counts Roots and Juggernaut to an extent makes it so that your movement speed can't be lowered below base movement speed, which would make you think that you can't go slower than a certain value no matter what you're standing on. But Tar Ground used to make you go slower than base movement speed anyways, because it would alter your base movement speed and make that lower. So it was like,
you can't go below base, but your base gets lower.
Exactly. It's that sort of rules lawyering. Yes.
Oh my god. Yeah. I think like things like slows can be okay when there's a thing on the ground over there that's zoning you that will slow you if you step into it. The problem in PoE is that 90% of the time, this shit is just put on your character. So like,
it's
you're
cast right under
fighting,
your feet.
vines grab you. You're standing there, an ice prison that disables your movement skills and slows you appears around you instantly. All of this stuff that just happens to you, it's thrown on you. So there's no like counterplay to it, apart from to like then get out of the way and then deal with it and then suffer.
It's especially true and also a game where the deadliest thing in Path of Exile is stopping to pick up an item. Like, Path of Exile is so binary in that sense. Like, the #1 defense is to not stop moving. So to then just have instant things just disabling your character in some way is super crippling. If this game had a much slower time to kill, then yeah, this stuff doesn't matter. But when we have such rapid time to kills, and that's the thing as well, it's like, it's the same thing a lot we talk about with like designing all these really mechanically in-depth boss fights. You can have fights like Black Sun, they can be really cool, but then can you really have that with like instant time to kills and the learning experience and this and the other is a bit like, yeah.
It's a shame because, like, conceptually, I love Archnemesis, the like building of these and making rares more difficult and the reward structure of it and the recipe stuff. And like, I love all of that, but like 60% of the stuff we're like dealing with mod-wise is anti-fun, and it just doesn't seem like great design to me.
No, like fingers crossed, they're just trying to weed out the ones we'll really super hate. And
well, so
when they redo the rare system, it'll just be the ones that are, you know. I always feel like they're trying to test like how much bullshit we're willing to put up with for certain types of rewards, like holding the stick out to see how far we'll fucking jump. Like, are you gonna do it for slows? Are you gonna do it for crystal prison? Are you gonna do it for like what? Like, just
Is there a shot?
How much shit you put up with before you disengage from a certain reward mechanic? Like, what is that theoretical limit?
Yeah. What, like, is there like a guaranteed exalt? And they just put it in there, and they're like, "Here, come on."
You have to wade through every slow in the game to get to it.
All the way up.
They've got.
Up the hill.
I'm going to sound like a shill here, but there are some mechanics that I like.
There are some good ones.
I like Sentinel.
Hang on, can I just say that isn't a very shill statement? There are some mechanics that I like.
You
Like, come
shill,
on.
how dare you?
Yeah, I would probably be accused of being a shill by someone for that, regardless, though. There's a few that are neat. Like there's the Sentinel one is one that I really like, where you hit a rare mob and it like builds up this shield icon that then shoots out at you in the direction you were hitting it from. So you have to like be constantly repositioning around it to avoid the counter attack, which is really
I kind of
cool.
wish the laser was a bit more obvious at times. Because
It'd
the
be like
little
Box
laser
Laser
that
where
shoots
he
out at
does
you.
that big beam.
Yeah.
The ice prison could be a fun thing if it didn't disable your movement skills and slow you. If it just whacked this like semicircle thing
It
around
needs
you,
to have like a good tell, like an actual little like baby crystals on the ground with some
You're
sort
like,
of like runic design, and then it goes like crack crack, and then you have to get out of it before the third like sound cue / visual cue that it like as the rune completes or something like that.
that'd be cool. Yeah.
It needs to, if it's gonna appear directly on your character, then you need to tell to be like, oh crap, this is what I definitely don't stand in.
That ice prison with the open gap where you can't like use a movement skill to get out of it thing, that happened to me when the mob was standing on the edge of the map, so that the exit was on the edge of the map, so I couldn't get out of it.
Oh,
and there was
no.
the shock boys there, of course, because
Yeah,
I
I've
was
had
doing
that
that
happen
combo.
to me as well.
It feels like a lot of the things that rub up against people the wrong way, and that we've been complaining about as far as the new stuff, the new content on the podcast.
Is the core gameplay of Path of Exile? What?
No, it's things where the designers had a really specific vision of how you're supposed to interact with this mechanic, and they had to disable a lot of player tools in order to ensure people would interact with the mechanic in this way. You know, sort of like Cyrus Maze, where you can't like jump over the walls and stuff. You have to path out through the maze. With the ice thing, you have to walk out. They want you to do X thing. And because Path of Exile is a game with so much freedom in terms of character design and what tools you'll have at your disposal as a player, they have to ensure you actually do X thing and interact with it the way they want, they have to disable a bunch of shit, which is kind of the biggest flaw of a game with as much freedom as Path of Exile. I don't really see a way around that. I just think designing mechanics that can only be interacted with in one specific way is something Path of Exile just isn't suited for. You need to have more general threats than, you know, this is what I want the player to do in this situation.
Movement skills designed properly, that is not necessary to do that, because you can put mechanics in that tax your movement skill cooldowns. So say you're using Flame Dash and they drop the Ice Prism on you and you're still able to use your movement skill to get out of it, well, then you've burned one of your cooldowns to get out of that. If then some other explosion is happening, you need to dodge that.
Right.
And then you dodge that, and then you dodge the next thing, and then, oh, you're out of cooldowns because your resources are being taxed. That's actually good. I think that's good, like combat encounter design.
Yeah, creating player pressure is better than just turning stuff off.
Sorry, BK. One thing I found quite funny about this conversation is while we've been talking about this particular ice mechanic, there's been quite a few people in chat saying, but if you have phasing, you can just walk through it though, which just shows how arbitrary these barriers are. Because, yeah, you can just walk through it if you have phasing. So why does there need to be that such insane restriction? And it's often that thing which annoys me about talking about video games is that if there is one workaround, you're like, just do the one workaround. Duh. And it's like, well, that's not really the point. Like, you know. Because someone chose to do it that way, because that's how games get made, is they sat down, they had the conversation, said, yeah, let's do it, and we do it this way. So, I don't know. I do think it's an interesting point of view, because I do actually really like Archnemesis, despite the UI stuff. Like, even with some of the mods being kind of irritating, and like screwing over certain builds, maybe I'd feel differently if I was playing a build like RF that got particularly like ruined by certain mods. I think that's another thing as well with Path of Exile, is like your experience about how good or bad a mechanic is varies so much based on the build you're playing. Like there have been some league mechanics where I'm like, this is fine, I don't see what the issue is. Then I do it on every build, I'm like, oh, I can now see what the issue is.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I remember hating Incursion at first because I League started Flicker Strike that league, and you literally couldn't do the boss with Flicker Strike because it had a hitbox underneath it that was constantly active, dealing damage, and the Flicker Strike hitbox was the same as that hitbox. So if you tried to flicker it, you would constantly take damage.
You get sucked up under the Hoover and die.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like the easiest boss in the world for every other build because it didn't do anything, and it was just a big damage or a big HP sponge. But if you were playing Flicker, you couldn't do it unless you had, you know, enough recovery to just sustain through the damage.
Yeah, it's like I think a big one for me was Launch Delirium. So I really enjoyed Launch Delirium. I think Launch Delirium was one of my favorite league starts ever. But I was playing Corsair carry that league start, and that Corsair was particularly strong that patch. So Delirium is a really easy mechanic if you never need to stand still for more than 0.1 seconds. So I was like, this is such an easy mechanic. Why are people dying complaining about explosions? And I did my second build. I'm like, oh, I can see the problem. You instantly die from the volatile things the second you stop doing anything. I can see why this is difficult for some players. Yeah, this is a problem now. Yeah.
And it does kind of give you insight into why some of these problems might show up, because there's only so much playtesting the team of people who are allowed to see the material before it goes to the public can actually do. And there's so many builds in PoE.
Yeah. Okay, so on the Archnemesis stuff, before we move on to future league plans, we've spent a lot of time ragging on it, assuming they do the UI improvements, because they said they are going to do some UI improvements. Do you see this league keeping your attention long term?
I mean, even if they didn't do the UI improvements, I'd still just narrow down the ones that I want to do and can do quickly and just pick those up. I would have a purge through all my things and then just do those.
It's very good at generating rewards of a certain type just due to the stacking nature of putting like what you want in first and then multiplying it out. That like I'll continue to do it no matter what, because then I can just generate my own scarabs or generate some fossils or like whatever little project I have that I need something for, that I'm planning in advance enough for. It's easy enough to generate because it's like, okay, that's just trading I don't have to do.
Yeah, but when you get to the big ones, like, just trying to build up Innocence and Katava, and that's a bit painful. So I don't think I'd go the big ones very much in the future.
Octavian?
What was that? The will I like? Do you think I think it will retain my interest for very long?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the patch will, because there's all the new content and the passage tree to play with and all that with the Atlas. But I don't think Archnemesis has legs for a full league, if that makes sense, without the UI changing. Maybe I'm just particularly sensitive to this sort of thing, but it legitimately gives me a headache after a few maps of trying to interact with it, if I'm, at all thinking about trying to build a recipe or something. And it's not really even like the complexity of the charts. It's just the managing the inventory. I have very little tolerance for it. It makes my head hurt. I don't want to do it. And so, yeah, I've been skipping it in like half the maps I run.
Yeah, I think if it goes to like a best series sort of book where you can just click on thing and it auto populates and then you run the map and click on alter 4 times, then I think it would be easy peasy.
Ziggy?
I think the frustration points of it weigh on it very heavily. And for me personally, like I was ready to start filtering out most things and just like picking up currency ones or something. Like just like one simple, very simple recipe and doing that, like tapering to that. I was basically ready like a few days into the league to do that. But I'm sticking with it a bit more and pushing out for a while first. I think most people who like try to engage with it will do one like Innocence Touch recipe, big recipe boom, and they'll be like, yay, cool, I got an Exalt drop or 2 Exalt drops or something like that. And then they'll never do it again. And then they'll like barely engage with the mechanic beyond that point. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens for most people.
Yep.
It would be really nice, since we're on the topic of the UI improvement still, it would be really nice if I could plan a recipe at the first thing that I interact with and go, all right, I want to do this first, then that, then that, then that. And then when I go to the second one, it puts the second one in. When I go to the third one, it puts the third one in. So I don't have to go looking for it each time I do it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I do the busy work once at one point in the map, rather than stopping to do a little busy work 4 times in every map.
To round out the episode, if we could just go around and just say, what's your future goals for the league? Either if it's like a particular challenge you've set yourself or a future build. BrittleKnee.
I want to do some sort of mega clear speed, super big boom shatter build at some point. It sounds really fun. And then I definitely want to dive into, like, the boat changes weren't really enough to get me excited enough to league start for it, but I know that there's going to be like things that people will figure out and whatnot that will sort of like start to pop up, because bows have always been my favorite archetype. And so like the way I took the patch notes was basically like, okay, it'll be easier to start bows and you'll get a little bit further, but their in-game viability is still not there. They still need additional tools to get there. And yeah, so probably make a lot of currency and then just try and figure out like where bows actually are. I'm sure other people will get there before me, but I don't know. Going through the process is always fun.
Amie?
I'm happy to go with my occultist for now. 6 linking my shavs. That's some future goals right there. That'll be great. But in the very far future, if Ziggy and I eventually tend to split up and go solo, I want to try the gull with all the shrine stuff and the 20 exalt boots, and just like, because I'm worried that it's gonna go. It's not gonna be here next league, so I want to do
A fellow
that.
shrine enjoyer.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I don't even have them. Ziggy's got them on his map, and whenever he gets 2 shrines and I only get 1, I'm like, ah.
The shrine one's
it.
great. Oh, that's such a fun node. It's like literally a node that doesn't like improve your loot drops or anything like that. It's just like you get 2 shrine effects and they last longer and they're more powerful. I'm like, yes, I want things that make my mapping feel more fun.
So this is my logic. Why do you want loot? So you can make your character better. I can click a button that instantly makes my character better. It comes at the cost of a little bit of loot, but I could do that every map multiple times.
Sick. Yeah, the shrine stuff's great. I don't think I'll ever drop that. I might drop like essence and stuff, but I'm not going to drop the shrines. It's too good. It's too good.
What about you,
Ziggy? Nearby goals. I want to do more bossing. I want to redo some of the bosses we've already done, so that we can, so I can feel like a little bit more out of the mechanics now. Like the black stuff, for example, I really want to face again. So that's a big amount of time. Just got to run some maps for that. The biggest threat to me this league, Path of Exile long-term plans, is just other games coming out, which is a good sign, because like I think Path of Exile endgame right now is in the best place it's been maybe ever. It's really good.
Yeah,
It's a really good Atlas, and I want to keep playing it, but Warhammer's coming out in a couple days. I'm probably going to play some of that too, so that's going to distract me a bit, but I'm very tempted to, maybe come back after playing a bit of that to smash out some bow stuff. Maybe play around with that some more, because I'm very curious about making a banger of a build with that new bow.
Yeah.
It's fun shooting many projectiles.
Let's see that. Octavian?
I've actually been really enjoying the Stormcall build, and I've been really enjoying self-casting again. It feels remarkably refreshing to not have traps or mines or totems or something doing it for me, and just I press button and damage happen, and I press other button and bigger damage happen. So I want to experiment a little bit more with some self-cast builds, and there's a alt quality for Frostbolt that gives it the ability to return. And I believe when you split a projectile, all individual split projectiles are then capable of returning to the target. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I believe that's the case. I'm going to have to test it. And I want to do that with maybe as like a Deadeye self-caster for the extra proj, and just play a bullet hell build where I use Ashes of the Stars to scale the alt quality on the Frostbolt to as much as I can possibly scale it, and get tons of bullets going forwards and splitting and coming back and just
Can you
zooming
split
all over the place.
Frostbolts? I thought they just auto pierce.
You can remove their ability to pierce by using Snake Pit, I believe.
Right, okay.
And then the split should take priority over the chain, because I believe it happens earlier in the priority list. But I'm not 100% sure on that. It's a build it's simmering in the back of my mind. I haven't tested it all. It might not work.
Sounds fun. I dig it. I have problems. Well, I mean, that's just, I don't need to expand on that. Another problem that I have is, so I'm getting ready to play my next build, and I'm very aware that my current build has 200% movement speed.
No, no.
Yes.
Just step down.
Yeah, so anything I play that doesn't have 200% movement speed is going to feel really bad in comparison.
I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, so I could just
step down
spend
is
a couple
always
more
brutal.
days mapping on my Corsair character, but I've managed to collect like some insane gear for Ignite, and as a completely different playstyle, because like with Corsair Ground, you shoot an arrow, you put like a poison puddle on the floor, completely different build. Burning Ground Fire Trap, you throw a trap.
God damn it, Tarke.
That puts a burning thing on the ground.
That's Caustic Arrow, but red.
No, because you
It
throw
has an extra step too, okay?
you throw a
You
trap.
have to throw the thing.
Next, you're gonna play Cold Snap.
No, that's just boring. It's boring. But no, because I dropped a near perfect Searing Touch. It's like one off the percent damage roll and 2 off the dot roll. I got the Ash on hit ring from Blackstar. I've got a really nice +1 fire gem, fire damage amulet. I've got some cool exposure gloves. Like, I've got loads of gear for it. It's a build I wanted to play last league. It's been buffed substantially this league, so I kind of want to play it for that reason. So that's something I'm tempted to play, but I'm very aware that without the 20% movement speed thing, it will just probably feel a lot worse. Saying that though, I really want to do some Winter Orb. Is Winter Orb's the channeling one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I want
Yeah,
to do
cool
some. I want to do some Winter Orb this league. I haven't got any gear for Winter Orb though, so I'm a little bit wary about diving into that with no gear for an SSF. But I think that's going to be like my goal for the league: a cool Winter Orb character.
What's drawing you to that?
I thought Winter Orb was cool when it first came out. It then got nerfed. No one touched it. I then have been thinking about playing it the last couple of leagues because I know it worked with enough gear. And now it does like a lot more damage. So I'm like, oh, Winter Orb could be pretty good. Also, another thing, I do get like some RSI issues with my hands. And one thing which is kind of cool about Winter Orb is you just bind it to a button and it auto targets and everything. So anything which from a quality of life point of view like reduces inputs is nice, but playing stuff like RF I find quite boring. So it's like I feel it's like a good medium ground where I get to hold a button, things happen, I can run around like a headless chicken, but I still have to play the video game. It's like I always really enjoy the idea of putting together a Death Oath character. I then get it into maps, and I'm like, this is boring as hell. So I need to like press something. I want like a walking build where I still have to actually play the video game, and I feel like Winter Orb is a really nice middle ground. But I'm probably gonna do a fire trap build in between.
Plans, big plans, Tarke. Your Battle Brothers are going to be benched for a while, it sounds like.
Oh, I'm going to play fuck ton Battle Brothers. Battle Brothers is an amazing... That's one thing I will say. I was really worried, because Battle Brothers is the best video game ever made. I was genuinely really concerned going into 317 that within like an hour, I'd just be like, this is shit compared to Battle Brothers. I'm just going to go back to Battle Brothers. The new Atlas is so much fun that I'm like, I could do this for a bit more. Like, I could make another build. I don't instantly want to go back to Battle Brothers. So for me to think that this game can somewhat compete with Battle Brothers is fucking high praise, because Battle Brothers is genuinely the best video game ever made. Yeah.
So despite all the slows, they gotcha. GGD gotcha.
Well, that's the thing. If you've got 200% movement speed and you get slowed, you're still, like, really fucking quick. Like, it's the workaround. If you just make a really fast character, you get slowed, and you're like, well, I'm still pretty fast. Yeah.
40% movement speed now. Damn.
I am worried that the rest of this league and SSF is me just taking my Queen of the Forest and just trading it between characters. Because then I'm just gonna end up making the exact same evasion build every single, like oh, this one's got Ghost Dance and this one also has Ghost Dance. Nice. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
The end.
Nice.
The end. Yes.
We talked about all the things.
We talked about the things. Yeah.
We did the stuff.
Yeah.
It's not even midday yet.
Yep. We spoke about Battle Brothers. What else is there to talk about?
Yep.
Ziggy
Maybe
mentioned
my
Warhammer.
sandwich.
Let's start with Baeclast
I did.
topics. Battle Brothers. First item.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. That was
podcast.
because this is
Thank you.
actually is what really happened, chat. Rise and Noogie said, please, I really want to be on this podcast. And I said, no, you have to leave. Because I'm going to slowly phase out all the PoE people, then slowly replace them with Battle Brothers people, until, without you even realize, it's just a Battle Brothers podcast. That is the plan. That is my long-term plan for Baeclast. Let's go.
One person in chat is very pogging about that.
Dude, like, my Battle Brothers content gets about 20 views on YouTube, but those 20 people fucking love it. They're like, yes. The hierarchy of
old accounts.
Tarke, like, fans, there's the weather guys who only want to fucking know about the weather. Like, that's the only thing they live for. Then it's the Battle Brothers guys, and then it's like the PoE people down here somewhere. But like the Is It Raining crowd, those guys are fucking, they're intense.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for allowing us to come on your podcast before it pivots. So,
Yeah.
Thank you for being part of the pivot.
oh.
Another PoE podcast dies. Peppy hands.
My goal is to outlive PoE. I reckon I could pull it off. It might just be me talking to myself, but
I reckon PoE's got another decade in it.
well, I would hope
Unless the
I've got another
nature of
decade in
gaming
it.
changes.
I'm hoping I've got another 10 years in me.
Hope so too.
Yeah. Right. Well, in the words of me talking to Chris Wilson, you can leave now.
All right, cool. Thanks again for the invite. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for coming on, BK. Thank you very much for coming on, Amie.
Thank you.
Ziggy and Octavian,
Bye.
I guess I will also thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
We can go rub some yogurt on things.
Yes.
Yogurt.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned, Tarke hasn't said yogurt. This
Greek yogurt.
Oh yeah, say it your way, Tarke.
Yogurt.
Thank you. All right.
yogurt.
Yeah.
It's
Give me
the
a good
correct
laugh
it's
for
yogurt.
later.
Yeah.
Rub some yogurt on
Mhm.
some bagels.
No, bagel. Wait, hang on. Do I say bagel or bagel? No, it's fucking bagel, mate.
I don't know. You're saying it.
Who
Yogurt
the fuck
bagel.
says bagel?
The bagel.
Does anyone say bagel?
It's like a bagel, but they make it out of baguettes. It's got 2 G's. Bagel.
I don't think anyone calls it that. Maybe someone called Miguel might call it that.
Waggle. Waggle says bagel.
All right, I'm gonna go now.
Alright, catch you later, Octavian.
Bye.
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 Are you okay, Tarke?
I'm fine.
Did I hurt you?
No.
Did I hurt your build?
No,
build
I felt really bad with that. Because I said this in one of my videos. I don't necessarily care that I made a bunch of people play a build that wasn't that great. But I did genuinely feel bad that you were playing a build that wasn't that great. I was like, oh, I know Amie.
You know what?
Oh.
You're lucky though, because Ziggy's was so much worse.
Yes, and
But I
I
did
had
feel
I
like
had no
capable.
hand in that build. I had
Yeah,
nothing to do with that
well.
one.
No, I think the whole Baeclast is under the bus for that because you were super confident. You're like, fuck yeah, get this quiver, chuck it on. Shit's
Yeah.
dope. You're gonna be
Mhm.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Okay, I will say Ziggy. I'll
Play
say
it, Ziggy.
I'll say this to you. If I get that fucking quiver in SSF, I will play that build.
Do it.
Yeah. I'm not
Do
going to
it.
get the quiver because it only drops in lab. But if I do, I'll play it. You know, it only drops in fucking lab, so I'm
Go on, do
safe.
some lab farming.
But if it does drop, I'll play the build.
All right, good. Thank you, Tarke.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day, you two. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.